Sure.
It's coming.
Last Sunday.
You saw something.
Oh. You're right. There's five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 before. But now the 5 are not where the 5 were.
Sir, we're ready. Thank
So
you.
I could,
Alrighty.
I did do that.
Just down this.
All right, welcome everybody to our July meeting of the Administration Public Works Committee. I don't have too much to say here this evening, so why don't we start with our roll call?
Councilmember Preston,
Here.
Councilmember Mabry,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here,
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Bakker, Councilmember Bannick,
here.
Councilmember Albers.
Here.
Right, that brings us to the approval of minutes. I know Mr. Mabry wanted to make a quick adjustment.
Not the least, approve the meeting minutes with the correction of spelling of Marbury to the other Marbury, spelled M-A-B-R-Y, that's all. It's the worst I could find.
Motion made by Councilmember Mabry with a quick tweak on the name. Anybody care to second it? Seconded by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor of approving our June minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. That brings us to public participation. There's nobody in the room with us. I don't think I see anybody on the line.
Ms. Clark, I believe, is online.
Okay, Teresa, if you wanted to say anything for public participation, just raise your hand, or if you're just watching, that's cool too. Just let us know. You good? All right. That brings us to our administration portion with an update on the state funding request for erosion mitigation.
Okay,
Mr. Lee.
and thank you, Chair Farmer. As the council and the committee here are as well aware of last week's email out to the council, is that the governor had decided to line item veto the city's $250,000 appropriation for watershed erosion mitigation projects here in the city. That funding would have been allowed to be utilized. It's a 100% match. So the city did have 300,000 set aside this year for watershed erosion projects. So 250 of that would have just had to been dedicated towards one of the eligible projects, which in this case gave us pretty vast reach, considering that the council had a couple projects in queue. Of those would have been the Evergreen Forest Creek restoration, going towards that, the Highlands at Wild Horse, that project, pushing toward that the basin retrofit project along Cox Creek, but also potentially putting together something for the stormwater management master plan. So either of those 4 projects could have, proceeded a lot further this year if that additional funding could have come on. That said, it is noted that without additional funding, external funding on top of that, we would have kind of had to choose one. So those 4 would have been eligible. But to give a little history, we had requested back in 2023 $500,000 from the state. They originally had wanted a 25% match, but then waived it. In 2024, we reduced it at the governor's office's direction to $350,000 with a 40% match based off their recommendation. But then the legislature ended up waiving that as well. But then that was line item vetoed by Governor Parson. And then 2025, we had once again went back and changed the amount being requested and increased our match to 100%. Based off the governor's direction. In this case, we had a new governor, so we had thought that would potentially lead to a different outcome. And in early February and then into March, there was some indication that we would be able to, if it could get through the legislature, that it would not be targeted for a veto. That said, after the legislature had completed their session and passed the budget on to the governor's office, at that point, we did not hear too much from the governor's office, even though we had requested a meeting and had originally set one up. And that said, they never got back to us. Our legislative consultant and the department had been reaching out to them pretty consistently. Quite a bit of information was provided to them, plus the legislature. All in all, though, it somewhat went dark. And then we had the decision that came out. So in this case, it does not seem that this method in the report here tonight does not seem that this method is, the kind of the definition of insanity would be, going back and doing the same thing and expecting different results. This time, we actually did have a different governor, and there was some hope there because they had given us some positive feedback from the get-go in those initial meetings. That said, the idea tonight was to brief the council. It is a for information item, but just start kind of giving some ideas. It's gonna be a broader discussion at the council meeting, upcoming council meeting, but just broader discussion about potential opportunities available to the city. Doing some research, there are a couple different ways. None of these are necessarily gonna give you a ton of money in grant funding, at 250,000 would probably be on the high end for most of these, but there is some data out there that would need to be confirmed by a consultant that you could potentially isolate one watershed in a 9-element plan for 319 funding. That's one avenue that could be looked at if that is true. On top of that, there's also some FEMA funding that is available. It's right now, it seems very difficult to get anything from FEMA when it comes to emergency preparedness, really watershed erosion, just based off what's been communicated to me. And then also there are some other options with the Metropolitan Sewer District that's supposed to be coming up here in 2026. We do not know what that program is supposed to look like just yet, but there could be some funding coming our way. And I actually did want to ask this of our Director of Planning, but the Missouri State Revolving Fund, I believe we had actually, that was part of some of the applications we had submitted previously and we were unsuccessful, correct?
Mr. Sturman, who's on the Watershed Erosion Task Force, had contacted them. That's where we kind of, I think, heard first about the 9-element plan.
Okay, so in that case, that was noted here too. That said, it does seem that a lot of these avenues, they're limited in funding, and it doesn't seem like there's a very big effort on their end to planning it out for these types of projects. That said, this does kind of go back to maybe we could isolate one single watershed and focus in on that. That is something that, at least from preliminary research, that shows that you can do that. You just have to show how it drains into the river system that it's going into and show the entirety of it. But that would isolate one watershed over the 8 remaining in the city. So there are some drawbacks to that approach as well. And further research would need to be done to confirm that is makes it eligible with the 9-element plan. So that's one item, but the other is potentially looking at neighborhood improvement districts. That's one item we could discuss. This is something that was recently passed within, it's being recently passed by the legislature and is being considered by the governor as another part of legislation, allowing neighborhood improvement districts to be created specifically for, well, they've always been able to be created for watershed erosion mitigation projects, but they would have to affect public property. The change in recent legislation that the governor may be passing here shortly is that it would allow it for the benefit to a private property. So in that case, we could identify, in theory, a large group of residents that are impacted by the watershed, maybe everyone that is draining into Cox Creek or draining into each watershed, and then identify it that way. And in that case, it wouldn't be, one group of residents in the city funding the improvements. It would be the residents that are being directly impacted by the watershed itself. So just some ideas. Obviously, the city general obligation bonds are listed here, but that said, it's something that we have not done since, well, we've done it for the SID, but it's something we typically don't do as a city, but obviously it is an opportunity available. And then there are also other funding mechanisms that are tied directly to taxes. So wanted to open up the discussion, but this will be something for information tonight, but we'll have a little bit more information going forward to the city council. Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Ms.
Diane,
Quick
yeah.
question, so on the neighborhood, if we did a neighborhood district, it says property owners in these areas would agree to special assessments, so how does that work?
So there's two ways.
Do you agree or they?
Yeah, so there's two ways that a NID can be produced, and we have had a NID for the sewer district that we did down in Manchester. The way that was produced is the way that is the state, I would almost say, encourages, is by petition. I think Mr. Marshall would be able to would attest to this, that the residents actually came to the city in that case, and that's the same with this. They would need to come to the city with a petition showing 3/4 of the residents that would be impacted would be in this district, support it, and then the council could pass ballot language that then would have to be voted on by the whole populace. The other way to do it would be, I believe it is I'd have to get the exact percentage, but a certain percentage, I think it's 10 or 11 council members could approve ballot language without the petition. So there's two ways to get it on the ballot, but it does have to be approved by the voters. So the council in theory could, with almost, it's not a perfect 2/3, 3/4 majority, it's like 10. There's a strange equation within the state code that calculated out to 10 or 11 council members out of the 16 would have to vote to put it on the ballot without the petition. If it had the petition with it, it would be a simple majority. So in that case, either or, it would be defined by the city and then approved by the council, but that is something that could be looked into if we wanted to explore it, at least along Cox Creek. For the other watersheds have not been studied as much.
Anybody else? Mr. Mabry?
I don't wanna be out of turn, but this is a big hitter. All things erosion. And just a question, Mr. Chair, are we looking to devote as much attention to this whole realm of erosion control and the traumas that's coming from it as one big bite, either before or will it be after tonight's agenda of other issues, so that whatever time's remaining for a otherwise sane departing time back to our families, we would then take, whether that's a half-hour block or, my word, we've got an hour to spend on this. Are we going to hit it now, take whatever half hour or hour and a half it takes to consume all the issues, so we can give Mr. Lee something to chew in on and report later? So it's a kind of a simple question, but just looking how we're gonna bite this off. And
I mean, I would say that now is kind of an appropriate time to do it, having spent a very significant amount of time on this. While I am pleased that we have a lot of different options on the table, I think one of the things that strikes me with this, much like, I guess before some of you guys were on the council, we approached the internet issue a while back, and we expended a great deal of federal money at the time to do, I guess, as good as we could do. It certainly could have been better. So when we look at our priority list of the cities, or our council's kind of priority list of projects, watershed erosion has moved to the top pretty much across the board. And so, for me, while I'm very frustrated and sadly not surprised that we wound up getting line item vetoed on this thing, and I would have greatly appreciated the $250,000 from the state. That is less than a small drop of water in the problem that we have here. So I think, and we've spent an enormous amount of time on this, as Mr. Bunich can attest to, at the task force. Like our concept of continuing to chase other people's money for this problem is a fool's errand. It doesn't matter what version of it we look at. I think it is, we were talking about this before the meeting went live, there was this terrible flooding incident in Texas, which thankfully we don't have those issues here at the moment. But that's another one of these places where it is a very clear and present danger and problem. And for whatever reason, the powers that be just choose to not do seemingly anything about it. And so, whether it's, Tom and I have talked a lot about the NID and different versions of this thing, and I use this example in our task force a lot. My subdivision happens to have one of the largest basins in the city. And when I became a trustee, before I was a council member, we got nothing but complaints about how ugly and awful this thing was. And so we spend a lot of money every year to make this thing look nice. And 3 houses in my 400 house neighborhood feed water into this pond. So there is a concept for the people. We've got Greg Berger, who's on our task force, whose house is literally caving into a creek. Who, yes, those of us, myself included, that live on the creek, it's a personal issue for us. But everybody's water winds up in this place. It doesn't matter how far away from a creek or whatever you are. The sewer systems dump into these tributaries. That's where they go. So we have to have, I think, a very real conversation about from a city standpoint, our spending priorities. I'm frustrated about the governor, but I go back and I look and, you know, we have a line item in our budget for $500,000 for pickleball court. What are we asking the state for 250 grand for watershed for? You can't say you can't pay for something when you can pay for all kinds of other stuff. So at the end of the day, we can have a much longer conversation if you want. I do not see, after spending however many years we've been doing this, Joe, 4 or 5, I think 6, I think I'm almost at 6 years on this now. The only viable solution to this is what some of our neighboring municipalities has done, and that is to approach our residents as a whole with a parks and stormwater tax, which, by the way, will also only fund a very tiny percentage of what it is. And then we need to look at a city, as we're doing with other places. We had this conversation about this too. You know, we have spent a great deal of money on 100 and Old State, which is of course important to Mr. Vanek, and some of these other places that these are not our problems to fix. We are I'm all for deer culling because that's helped a lot. But again, not really our deal. And so we're spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars a year on fixing problems that aren't ours. And to a large extent throughout at least half of our city, this is an MSD problem. It is not a City of Wildwood problem. So we've spent a lot of money and gotten a lot of great information from the USGS, and the best piece of information we got is they are telling us that if we can retrofit a select number of basins that they've picked out, and ideally add a handful more in some very specific places. I mean, what were they saying, Joe? It's like 50 to 75% of the pressure comes off of the system. And to me, that's a city thing we can do. If I don't want it to happen, but if the triple meander gets blown out in one of these storms, that is not our problem. I mean, it's our inconvenience. Somebody else is gonna have to fix that. That's MSD or the state or whatever. So I don't want to become a person, and I don't want our city to become a collective that doesn't help where help is necessary and where we can't partner in a smart way. But we are investing an enormous amount of money in things that are just not our problem, which enables us to not fix the things that either are kind of our problem or are a very real danger to what we are doing. So, I mean, I'm happy to have whatever kind of conversation you guys want, but I don't see any other path other than that makes any level of sense.
You said that it was like half a dozen of these that take 50 to 75% of the load off.
Mhm.
Well, is there a ballpark right now?
To fix, so not including, I think it's 3 they wanted to add, right? So not including the 3 that they want to add, because that's a little bit more complicated.
Sure.
But the kind of rough estimate to fix the rest of them was what, $1.5 million, something like that?
It ranged anywhere from around $200,000 to $300,000, which was inexpensive compared to almost everything else we looked at.
Yeah, so when you total it all up, it's $1.5 million basically.
Gotcha.
And the philosophy on that is, this is one of those things where that's what science is telling us hopefully will work. The biggest issue, and I'm a very firm believer in this kind of science, but the biggest problem we have is a lot of the data that they're using is old data. Like they're not, whatever this thing is that hit today, I mean, that was a lot of rain, and that's what we find a lot. It's not that we're getting more rain total, we're just getting more rain in shorter bursts. And so it almost doesn't matter what you do to your water system. It's just our current one is for sure not built to handle that. But some of these other things might help. Yes, sir.
Well, I would certainly be in favor of looking at the budget to see what could be carved out of that to go to some of these projects, and I have kind of a question and the need to know more about this. If we repaired certain of these things, would there be a risk that if a big rain came, that it could get destroyed again by maybe some of the other ones that aren't able to handle that, and it kind of carries over to what we just fixed and wrecks everything?
Yeah, so
Is that making sense?
yeah, I think, I mean, and Joe or Rick, correct me if I'm wrong on this too, like what we've kind of figured out is really outside of this detention basin thing, which is a logistically pretty simple idea. It just hold more water for longer periods of time. Any repair that we make on any one of these critical areas in the creek, in theory, will fix that area, and in practice will injure something further down the creek. It's just how it works. So it's sort of like, you know, if you had a broken finger, you can splint that finger, but we're gonna break one of the other fingers for you.
Okay, that's
Just kind of how it goes.
what would be the process to change the budget? How does that work? We'd like to pull things out of the budget.
We're gonna be talking about the fiscal year 2026 capital this year, and I was actually looking today to kind of be an informational basis to kind of show what we're contractually obligated via grant funding, but we could do and also open to doing a, you know, shared screen type approach where we could walk through them. That said, I mean, if the council truly wanted to do it, it would come up as an actual appropriation item, so approving an agreement. I think more work would need to be done to finalize the plans and easement acquisition for the basins, but if that change was needed, you could have an amendment to the budget corresponding with the actual contract itself. So if we were doing one, you could do them both at the same time, practically. The council can do that at any time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot and just how we want to kind of approach the budget in 2026, because I kind of always feel like we're scrambling at the last minute to figure all this stuff out. So, you know, one of the things that helps me to make some decisions is to say, you know, this is the framework I'm going to use to look at all things. It doesn't make one thing better than the other thing. It's just like, this is what it is. So, you know, whether we're going down our capital improvement thing and, you know, something like the Green Pines Trail is on there, which I know would be very useful and helpful, but is that a thing that the city has to have in order to function? Probably not. So to me, that's a pretty easy thing to go, well, that moves to a list of things we would like to have if we all of a sudden have a bunch of extra cash, but there's a lot of other stuff that is necessary before we can get there. That's how I would do it, but everybody, I mean, obviously there's 16 of us, so we can all figure out our own way to do that. But I would maybe look at some of those things in that way. Like, what are things that are just absolutely impossible to, you know, stop or whatever we want to call it, versus things that are like, you know, like our pickleball court, which we kind of put an indefinite pause on. You know, would I like to have pickleball? I mean, personally, me, not so much, but I guess people like it. But again, this kind of relates back to some of that other stuff. So I think we can make those adjustments as we go. And, you know, if we start talking about them now, we've got several months in front of us to get it figured out. Yes, sir. Mr. Marshall.
Well, I'm gonna go back and put the old history hat on. This is not new. And when we finished and did the ribbon cutting at Anniversary Park, we said, once the park is done, people know we have it and we start working on trails, we're going back to the voters to get park and stormwater runoff tax approved. And every time we brought it up, everybody backs out from it. But I know back in 1998,
Council?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna run next year. I don't want any taxes on there. How are we gonna do this? And unfortunately, in 1998, 99, we had the same problem with our capital. We went out and knocked on doors, and I mean, we met every Sunday. We did flyers because the city can't pay to do this stuff, so we have to do it ourselves. But right now, we're getting $3 million a year from that 1/2 cent capital tax. So now it's 20 years, but what? That's $60 million we would have had. So, but nobody would help push that through. In today's world, I think with the ability to communicate to people, to show videos to people, to get people to see the physical damage. I mean, we were looking for, aren't the trails nice and isn't that a nice pavilion? To the point that what's realistic? When right as after we incorporated, I lived off of Valley Road. And this was before Rick's time. But Valley Road was shut down because the water coming out of Brentmore and the other area actually washed Valley Road out. It was down 40 feet. So in that particular case, we were going to have to, we had to get and move the creek over into my subdivision, rebuild it to put the road in. So it does happen. In that particular case, when the roads wash out and they're city roads, we have to eat that. So we have all of those examples of where and how those things happen. I guess my question would be is, I think we should get, just my thoughts, we should go to the ballot. And we should ask the voters, and we have to communicate to the voters, the park lovers, the watershed people, and the other people who just like what's going on, and really share with them the amount of money and what this does to a city that doesn't have a real estate tax, doesn't have the other. I don't think you'd have a chance at all to get a NID through.
Right.
That's just too hard unless it's your own sewer system or something where you're gonna have to get property owners and subdivisions. But I think the one question though is the percentage to get it approved on a ballot. At one election is 50% and one election is 60%. So I would certainly tell you to go for the 50%.
Right.
So when you do, and even if you had to do a special election,
Sure.
that's about $14,000 it used to be to the city to have a special election. And then you gotta really try to get people out there to get that over that number. We wouldn't see the money right away. It would be a year or 2 years. But then I would be in favor of going into our reserves and start making the changes that we think long-term is right for the city of Wildwood. And not one of these things about, well, until we can get funding, it's not gonna happen. It's just way too political, and quite honestly, they have some pretty good points. I mean, we do very well for a city, but we've done without, for almost 30 years. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we would have liked to have had. Said, nope, can't do that, can't do that. So I think if we look at that, the other thing I would question is that percentage is important. And then maybe we get an ad hoc committee or something to work on it, because we did a lot of stuff back, and I think I'm probably the only one still alive. For that gap, but that was tough, because we didn't, I think about that, we were spending millions of dollars for road improvement out of our general budget. And to get people to vote for that, and I remember the thing that we knocked on the door and told them is that the only time you're gonna see a noticeable change is when you buy a car. Because that half a cent would be like an extra back then, $400, $500. Oh, well, I guess you're probably right. But you look, our sales tax level is lower than a lot. So I mean, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge. It's not gonna be easy. And it would be really one of getting all of our ducks in a row to figure out when and how we get grouped together to try to fund it. But I just think we postponed it for so many years. It's not gonna get any better. It's gonna continue to get worse. And then I don't know, maybe that's another opportunity where you go back and does Ann Wagner have any monies?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting you bring this up. At least Mr. Lee and I think maybe. you
She's
guys-
always here when she wants something.
We had an opportunity to meet with her chief of staff, and we asked a lot of these questions, and he made it, number one, he said, well, Congresswoman Wagner doesn't believe in pork barrel politics.
Yeah.
And I think I said,
Tell her good luck in the next election.
I'm not sure that's what this is.
I know.
And then he made it very clear, she has no interest in bringing any money back to the district. She thinks that is just not the purpose of her job. So
I just think as long as that writing is documented, because when she wants something, she's out here in a heartbeat.
Mhm.
And, oh, we need your, look what I'm doing, that's not, and then I think if that's that way, we ought to use all the opportunities we have to communicate her opinion.
Yeah.
Because that's not gonna help anybody in that election. So I just throw that out as another option.
We're one of the only cities that doesn't do something for our parks like this too, right?
correct, yep.
And we've got the largest parks, so it's a little,
And one of the largest cities.
yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit of a,
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Ed, about the reserve, I think Tracy and I are the only two that were on when we voted to do a big chunk of money to internet and a big chunk of money to watershed. And seemingly overnight, that just shifted to, well, we got federal money for the internet and everything else goes away.
I just, again, I didn't have a chance to vote on that, but I think we missed some really opportunities nothing happens tomorrow.
Right.
If you don't start it now, you're not gonna see that. But I also believe that we do have some pretty smart residents, but we have to do a really, really good job of communicating. Because they will do a really big job about why do we have this, why do we have that? But that's just my 2 cents worth, but I think if we wanna move in that direction, it's really one that we need to do all the basic homework. What election do you put it on? Do you do a special election? What, how much money do we think it would take? Because you have to raise that money. The city can't pay for it.
Right.
What can the city do communication wise? Because you gotta kind of do both sides of it. But I think we have enough examples of how bad it is. It ought to be pretty easy to do a side-by-side comparison.
And we have a lot of neighboring municipalities that have been very successful at this recently, so it should be,
Yeah.
at least we can ask them how they did it. Their situation is different, but
That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And I got a quick answer
Yeah.
for, I believe from what I'm looking at here, it's if there is a general obligation tied to the ballot and it is on the April municipal election, that's when it needs the 57.14, which is commonly referred to as the 60%. So it seems like if we went to November or in the August election.
When's the August primaries? Aren't they in August? I mean, I know we're
They're
probably too
coming
late
up.
now,
Yeah.
but I just wanna make sure you don't set yourself up to fail by picking up, needing an extra 6 or 7% that you wouldn't.
Well, and that also puts it into an awkward thing with the municipal election, because, you know.
No, they're gonna be people you beg to come out.
Yeah, that's why.
It seems like it's tied directly to that municipal election. I think it's because they did that.
But what about a special election?
That would be 50 plus 1 vote.
There you go.
Sounds like. a
So
plan.
for that money you'd spend, and I don't know, it used to be, we used to have 25 election polls and it was $18,000. But that was an old time money. I don't know what it would be now.
I had to check. I remember it was something, seeing something like it was like 25K last time I.
Well, the last one we did was, no, that was just Ward 1 though, for the tie vote. And I think that the only time I don't know when we ever did a special election. Now I'm thinking about it.
It was the first time for everything.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it is an avenue.
Yeah.
And it's one of those issues where that's what it costs you to have I mean, you could check and see that, but I just think we need to really do some homework. If we gotta have 9, 11 people say, hey, I'm willing to go out and do that, because most people don't want a tax increase.
Right.
But I also believe they like to maintain their backyard and
In the parks.
the roads and the parks.
I've had a lot of conversations with people that are very opposed to tax increases in general. And specifically not at all opposed to this kind of a tax. This makes a lot of sense, although to what we've been saying, like we do have to be able to justify some of these other things that we're doing because, you know.
Oh, totally great. But I think and I guess this is back to Thomas and you guys doing the budget. I think this is the best preparation for a budget I've ever seen. So congratulations.
Great.
I think that's a big step forward.
So yeah, it probably wouldn't look good to put in a pickleball court at 500K and then ask the residents for.
I
a
mean, quite
sales
honestly,
tax.
it's not good to be sitting on the kind of reserves we have and
Right.
going to the residents asking them for money either, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because as soon as somebody puts out there, well, they have 11, 12 now. Oh, really? Yeah.
Mr. Vanek.
Just curious, I know you were speaking of the 3 homes around you, but I'm sure there's other homes that are in danger.
So with my,
Go ahead.
you mean with the pond by me? Yeah, so basically there's 3 houses in so our neighborhood is 383 homes. We have 3 houses that back up to the pond, so they're fine. They're not getting any trouble. And they're the only ones where the front half or I guess the back half of their house water goes into the pond.
Yeah, all the other water is not theirs.
Yeah, all the other water comes from all the houses going up from Thunderhead Canyon to Lafayette. That's what all seems to flow down. So, you know, Mr. Vunich and I have had a lot of conversations about this where it's like, hey, I think the pond, I'm happy to have the pond look great. But, you know, we have 383 people whose HOA fees are not very high, and a big chunk of this is going to a pond that none of them care about. They don't have to look at it or see it. And when I would get complaints from the other residents in other subdivisions, I would go, hey, I'm happy to, how about we split it? And they were like, why would we split it?
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, that's a very telling
You're
thing.
downstream from us, buddy.
That's right.
So I mean, there's other things in danger here. There's bridges, there's
Totally.
roads,
Yep.
there's
Every,
commercial development.
commercial development, infrastructure, you know, like sewer lines,
Yeah.
water lines.
And
all-
so if this gets washed out, then comes back to.
Yeah.
The city of Wildwood too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest example that we've used and is, you know, the triple meander, which is behind the Elegant Child, you know, there is I would say strong likelihood that is going to get punched straight through. And if that happens, all of that collapses, including the houses in Point Clayton and then Strecker Road on the right side, but then it goes directly into a bridge that we built that was like, I don't know, several $1 million. It is currently seemingly sort of just hanging in space.
So you could use the before picture could be all those junk cars, Joe, that used to be styled up that, so in that meander.
They're still back
They're
there.
still in there?
Yeah.
The county's way to solve that was to put junk flat cars in there and they just stacked them.
Yep.
They're still there, so.
All right, anybody, Mr. Mabry, you got something?
It would help me to know that we are giving Mr. Lee feelers to point himself toward self-sufficiency and a ballot measure and not continuing to feel like he has to try to give us options.
Yeah.
For other federal money, state money. Let's see if we can invent it from somewhere else. Even to the extent that I hear about reapportioning our own budget, our surplus, our priorities to make this the new number one, and pickleball's now reduced
At
to,
least three.
where this old boomer thinks about to be 25.
Right.
number Priority in case of other things that are a lot more important, even business development, but can we do that much for them? We're after the attack on the people to enlighten them against their will into convincing themselves that it's good money for them, because they're not gonna do anything if it's not something in for them.
Right.
To that end, where I thought the discussion would be is things like, are we going to direct that recommendation be made to the council that Mr. Lee's report, not the one that's in this report here, because it's been changed a little bit, even to the extent that there was a little comment about, there was a comment made by our legislative representative, there might have been a political component to it.
There
We don't need that.
Right.
We don't, and it wasn't in Mr. Lee's report. We need to be brutally dry and factual. And that report was that.
Mhm.
That needs to be marked from the mountaintop and front load our residents into a quick education that isn't gonna take a slow roll for 5 more years and trying to convince council members to support it too.
Yeah.
It's not an easy sell with me. So I just wondered, is that a feature of the goal of our long discussion about this tonight? Is to give him,
Yeah, so I mean, technically, I guess it's a for information item, so I mean, we can certainly, I mean, I think you're kind of clear on where we're going with this thing, but we can for sure make a motion if that's what you would like.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be also discussed at the council is the understanding, so
Right.
so either way works. The main thing though, we want, tonight, if we want to communicate and really push on, I know we had something in the e-newsletter last week that communicated what was sent out. But was repackaged just for more resident facing, not an email facing. If we want to really push that messaging, that could be something we get a motion on tonight while also
I would like
continuing to
to,
look
I
into.
think we should, go ahead. Kirsten.
Oh, I thought in conjunction with that, as we move ahead on investigating, putting a tax on the ballot, can we also talk about using some reserves to get things going faster? And then when we do go to the taxpayers, we can say, we're already doing this, but we need, I don't know. Can it
Yeah, I was
be-
trying to remember,
I know.
well, you guys were there, Tom, you weren't here yet. I thought we approved $3 million for this.
For
I thought it was 3 million for the internet and 3 million for watershed
Yeah, and then it
out of the
doesn't.
reserve, and then all of a sudden it was 7 million from ARPA and no more watershed anything.
So that's what I'm saying, can we look into whatever that was, or could be, or whatever, to get it started before it becomes more expensive and then, you know, replace it later if we pass the tax or whatever, however that needs to work. But can that be like a joint conversation?
It sure can.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so, I'll get you one second. So Tom and I talked a little bit about this, and what I understand, and I could be wrong, is if we were to go to the ballot for this, we have the choice that we make as a city is, one, are we gonna put it on the ballot? And if we're gonna put it on the ballot, are we going to say this is a stormwater tax, a parks tax, or a stormwater and parks tax? And if it is the stormwater and parks, then we, as the elective body, get to determine what percentage of that is going where.
Some could go to maintenance, the other would go to bonding. I mean, you could make
Sure.
that decision. as
Yeah,
you
we could,
go,
right. And so I think because this is kind of an all-encompassing thing, and Joe, it's a good thing you're here. I mean, like, I think we also need to have a very real and honest conversation about, this is how much our current park system actually costs us every year. If we were to do nothing else, which I think a large portion of the people in the city are wanting even more stuff. So it's like, it independent of building whatever else all the other stuff we've got in here, it costs however much.
Just to maintain.
And by the way, we don't have that amount of, like, that's not just there's not some money tree sitting somewhere. And so when we're having to take our funds and go that way with it, now that means we have to limit what else we can do with them because we have to cover over maintenance. So I think having a very real and regular conversation about every part of this should be going on. And I agree with Mr. Mabry, like the original email that you wrote, Tom, about your feelings on this subject should not be sugar-coated. That is those were facts, and we shouldn't be afraid of communicating facts to people, even if certain people don't like those facts. That's how facts work.
You got the late night version.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr.
One
Van,
more thing regarding the apartments and the tax deferrals.
Right.
One of them, a sales tax for 10 years, is that correct?
I mean,
And that would go to this, I mean, if we didn't give that to the developer,
right,
that portion, just the sales tax.
Yeah.
Give them the other part. I mean, he comes in with what he wants, obviously.
Yeah.
He's very successful and he knows he can ask for it. If he gets it, it's good. If he doesn't, maybe he gets a portion of it. We've never done this before.
Right.
We're stepping our toe, instead of jumping in to the pool.
right,
We're sticking our toe in the water, giving him half of what he wants.
Mhm.
But saying, perhaps, saying, we can't do the sales tax because we need that money for all the issues that we have going on. We can't get money from the state, we can't get money from the federal government to do all this watershed stuff. It's necessary. It's necessary to the city, and I'm just planting the seed for tomorrow night.
yeah, no, I mean, that's a
But,
very real
I mean-
piece. The other side of it is, I mean, we can, and Mr. Vunich, I'm sure has, to the best of his ability, looked at what level of impact that apartment building will have, or.
I mean, he'll still probably build it, but he's just not gonna get everything he
Well,
wants.
right, I just mean though, if they, whether we give it to them or not, that building there, and same thing with the reserve or whatever. Those things all have genuine impacts on the
Sure.
watershed. And so, for us to go, here's a chapter 100 to build this big building, cause we wanna get more people in a town center, which puts more pressure on the watershed, which we aren't paying for.
Sure.
To me is kind of a hard,
Run around a circle.
yeah,
Just some thoughts.
Mr. Marshall.
Good thoughts, by the way.
Yeah.
And before I make the motion, I just want to kind of throw one more thing out there. Is as we do decide to do the research on this, I think we also ought to consider the charter requires us capping 4.2. I'd have two issues on the ballot. One, to spend the money necessary above that 4.2 for stormwater and parks, so you don't have to do this every time.
Right.
And then the other is to actually put a 1%, sales tax on for that, so that you get it both at the same time and not have to go back and say, well, we can't spend any more money than that. Because when
So
you
you're saying
start
you-
talking to capital improvements, I don't know that the capital improvements fall as much into watershed as it would into parks. So that would then open up you to be able to spend the money down the road into parks without having to go back each and every time you get to the point whatever the number is now, is it 4.1 or?
4.12.
So just a thought to put in. I think that would be a good question for the attorney to make sure that if you go that direction, we put both items on the ballot. It's gonna cost the same amount to do the ballot.
Right.
Whether you have two questions on it or one. And then the consideration would be what happens if one fails and the other doesn't. I don't know that that's the case either, but.
Right.
So, but to clarify, what you're saying is start exploring having two ballot initiatives at the same time. One would be increasing or changing that equation for that threshold for the capital expenditure. And then the other would be the actual tax, whatever's. the
One would be to get approval from the voters to let us go over the 4.1 million whenever
Mhm.
on any projects, which would then allow us to go ahead and do stormwater stuff in excess of $7-8 million down the road
So-
without having to go back every time.
So in that case, would it tie it directly, would you be saying, well, not you, but in general, would this requirement to the voters anyway, say, hey, we're getting rid of this provision of the charter, or are we
No, no,
gonna, we're just gonna put it in the storm?
We have to do it because it's in the charter.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, perfect.
I'm just saying, we're not gonna have somebody come in and tell us, we can't do the election because you're violating the charter. yeah, then you've lost your money and you get it defeated. So I mean, I think those are things we should be thinking about. How you will position it. I might be totally wrong on it. I just think that those are both two issues that we have provisions in our policies to handle it that we ought to.
So do you want to exclude stormwater and parks or just change the number in the vote? Like, do we want to say, because like right now it's at 4.2, do we want to have these guys figure out,
Well, I
it should be 8?
I actually think you don't have to explain it. As long as you know it's possible to go over the 4.2 and you don't have to break out the split between parks and watershed. I think then the city can decide down the road how you want to break that out. So if you want to do bonding for the watershed, or, I mean, if you had the money coming in for the parks, you could take some of the capital fund money and put it over to watershed if you needed to. So I just think that you could maybe put the two together. I would not do a park and a watershed one. I would do a combined one because that's the way our neighbors have it and everyone else. I think it makes more sense. But from our internal purposes, I would put it on there as a combined. And then I just think acknowledging that in the parks and water runoff thing, there's a potential that we'll be going over the 4.2. So we're gonna go ahead and get the voters' approval on that.
So you're saying the same, I get what, if you're, with your permission, Chair.
Yeah.
You're saying that back when we did the capital, we have that threshold there. So this would, since you're gonna be creating a new fund with this new, in theory, tax. And this would not have that same provision just for the stormwater parks fund. Just
For any infrastructure or any capital projects that the city takes on. I would have argued over, and I did and didn't go anywhere. I don't think technically by the charter, I don't think you could do that internet project. I think that's a violation of the charter because that we knowingly, it doesn't say where the money comes from. It says anytime the city spends the money over that amount, it will go to the voters. So in that particular case, I think if we go forward, I would do both in the same proposal. Then you're free to go with more money for the parks, more money down the road for that, and you don't have to go back and visit it every time you come up to that. Just my 2 cents worth.
No, I-
Mr. Mabry.
I hope this is short. Today, I had occasion to have some time. I drove on a road I never knew existed before. Old Manchester.
They call it Etherington?
It's in Ward 6.
We've got 9 of those.
Take it a minute.
This was Booness Road off of Old Manchester where it jumps across 100. And then I took a veer off Country Point. And as I turned around in the sharp length before the circle, came across an old man coming out, 80 years old, with his little tiny white dog. And I jumped out of my car and introduced myself. Boy, am I glad I caught you. I'm just driving around. What do I make of this Booness Road and this out here? It looks old. He talked about the fact that there's heritage sites on it.
Mhm.
And the fact that there were wagon tracks on Booness at one point in the past. And he just blurted out that one thing I want to tell you, 80-year-old man with a little tiny dog. There's just too many damn parks around here. Everything is parks. That was out of nowhere and pretty unsolicited. It made me remember that every time we talk about parks and erosion, you got a nice to have and you got a must have or you'll die. So it's by pure ignorance and my just not knowing the system. I'm bringing up the fact that whether it's by design or by the fact that if you're gonna get something that's unromantic, as long as you keep throwing the word parks in with it, or if the parks is nothing more than a maintenance, or else everything's gonna go to follow and you're gonna ruin everything you spent a lot of money to build in the first place. So that's my confusing point that I hope to be my last one.
So if you're asking why the two together, it's the way the state structured it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But have we satisfied ourselves that we're not just happy to think that everyone wants parks and everyone wants all the money you can think of and throw more parks at the city? And when you say the word parks, you got a shoe in yes vote. Or if there's a reason for some people, as this old codger came up with, is he probably will vote no if it's got the darn word parks anywhere on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably just a matter of our communication with this thing. I mean, I think that you're gonna have people, I mean, there are just people that don't care about the parks, and there are people that don't care about the watershed. I guess the hope is, or pickleball, but I guess the hope is that we, you know, maybe somebody cares about one or the other or gets the bigger picture of it. I mean, I kind of think, and you know, I told this to Tom, like, I think we put this thing on the ballot and let the citizens figure it out, because if they don't want either one of these things, well, I think that that's the wrong choice.
Let's leverage them. Let's leverage by that first message will be the seed. And you're gonna cause a lot of dissonance and upset and confusion with people with that thing that I would like to have the motion, whoever makes it, ordain that message from Mr. Lee's report be put in the West News magazine, if we can buy space to do it. And or it shall go in the something else publication that's public, not just our e-letter, that people don't like reading because it's online,
Right,
they
no.
don't like our
Yeah,
online.
put it out there.
Or that it doesn't go out in something else that'll be not mass consumed. But that's the kind of thing, it's time for the action and not kick it, as you brought up in the past, things get kicked down the road. Oh, don't bring up taxes, I don't wanna get,
Right.
my seat is suspect or anything like that. Whoever makes a motion, I'd like to have it appointed, clear. We're gonna win this, and we're not gonna get a second chance at it.
Can I add one?
Yeah.
And no problem communicating that message. I think it's the blunt truth, but that said, if we were to proceed with some type of ballot initiative, the minute that was approved by the council and we start working up the legalese to have it added to the ballot, the only thing the city can do is provide information on how that revenue would be spent. We cannot support it one way or another. If we were to pay for an advertisement, like say we put it on West News that was saying, hey, here's the reason why we need this, that could be constituted as arguing the city's case when we're supposed to be content neutral on anything that's within if it's our ballot measure. So just wanted to make sure
Your
that
letters
we
has
can do it
nothing to do
now.
with that.
Yeah, exactly. We can do
Yeah,
that now.
I would
But-
do that tomorrow.
Yeah, but after that ballot goes up,
Yeah.
we just want to make sure
Yeah.
I'll put together some stuff.
No, I would say, I mean, I think none of us, I mean, I think even Ed, you haven't been through one of these things, right? That ballot measure like that, well, you did with the original park thing, but like,
Oh, the capital
the
tax.
capital tax. So, I mean, I would suggest if we go down that road, which I think we probably will, we probably wanna have John or whoever come in and like explain exactly how we are as elected officials able to communicate these things, and then as.
And anything you do distribute, it cannot be pro or against, it has to be balanced.
Right, yeah.
But before the ballot.
Before it,
Before.
or what are
Like
our
a did you
abilities?
know kind of thing.
Yep.
Did you know that this is what this looked like and now this is what the erosion? Did you know how many parks we have? Did you know we have more parks than anybody? Did you know it costs this much every year
Mhm.
to maintain and not build any, like, we could have a whole series of like, and then magically the ballot initiative comes out. But I mean, I think a
Yeah,
lot of
that's how
that
it
could
works.
be upfront and really educate people.
Mr. Vunich.
Just as a point of information, we did put this particular issue to the voters in November 2008. It was the national election. Prevailing thought at that time was the more people that show up to vote, parks usually is carried in that wave of voters. It was the largest election, I think, in terms of Wildwood turnout. 21,000 people voted, 11,000 against the park and stormwater tax, 10,000 for. But we have a whole lot of information.
Yeah, that was before we were explaining anything.
How much was the increase? Half cent?
Half cent.
Yeah, that's that's still the max. Okay, well, so I've got, if you'd like, Ed, I'm happy I came up with one of these
Please.
fancy motions, if this is what you're talking about.
I bet it is.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it suggests to move to direct the city administrator to evaluate and report back to the city council on the feasibility, structure, and potential timing of placing a ballot measure before the voters of Wildwood that would establish a dedicated parks and stormwater sales tax pursuant to RSMO 644032 and applicable local statutes, and include language within that same measure to remove the current voter imposed spending threshold specifically for expenditures made from the new Parks and Stormwater Fund, thereby allowing the city to efficiently allocate funds towards eligible parks and stormwater projects without requiring separate voter approval for each individual project. The city administrator is further authorized to engage with legal counsel, financial advisors, and relevant staff to prepare background materials, identify statutory requirements, and assess potential ballot timelines and voter education strategies. No final action on the ballot measure is authorized at this time. That sounds pretty
Did you
good.
get all that?
I'm pleased with that.
Can you read that back, Amy?
Yeah. But I kind of think it's one of those issues that we need to decide as a committee that that's what we want to move forward, and then the work would begin.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many resources out there, but I think it could certainly be done by a subcommittee to do that, but I'd take that I'll make that motion.
All right. Anybody care a second? Seconded by Mr. Albers. We'll go that way. We'll get you on the next one, Tracy.
No, that's okay.
Any discussion on the motion? Everybody gets?
Just one comment, as Bob's thing. The idea is not whether they'll vote for the parks or the watershed, it's gonna be a lot more voters will come out. You'll have people, I would tell you, in my opinion, 90% of the people don't know we have a watershed problem.
Oh.
But I would also believe that 90% of people tell you we have a lot of parks. So I mean, I think you wanna draw those people in to get the approval to get the taxes on there. And if you put it combined the way it's supposed to be, then it ends up the council down the road, how you wanna divide that money up in order to do it. But I think it's just a bigger draw of people, because I just don't think you could get many people for the watershed unless you've experienced it.
I mean, I will say this, when we started this thing 6 years ago and we would put like the tent and stuff out at Celebrate Wildwood or whatever, the vast majority of the people would come up and say, what is a watershed? And now I have people stopping me in the grocery store.
Do you know there's a water problem?
Are you the one that is, do you
Yeah.
have anything to do with this? And so in the last several years, I think that this has become a very real thing that people are, even people that normally wouldn't care in any way are at least cognizant of.
Rain we're getting,
Yeah.
you know, it's drawing a lot of attention in the news and other locations, like that's a big factor too.
All right,
Okay.
any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Amy, I'll send this to you so you don't have to try to.
Try to keep it on one page.
All right, so Tom, you got your marching orders on that one? You feeling good? Now, Mr. Mabry, if you care to, you can certainly make a motion to encourage Mr. Lee to put this letter out in its entirety, the way that it was originally sent to us. Although I think he is aware that that is what we would like to have happen, but I'm happy, as I'm sure he would be, if you would like to make a motion along those lines to do that too, and we can button this whole thing up.
After a year, I'm still learning. Do we have the authority to make a motion to instruct Mr. Lee to do anything? Or do we have only the authority to recommend to the council that they instruct Mr. Lee to do anything?
I mean, I would say in this case, this is probably more of a committee thing than a full
Okay.
council thing. So, you know, usually what some of these things does, and when we lean on, you know, our city administrators in this way, if there's a kind of a gray area to that question, Tom or previous ones would be like, well, we probably want to talk to the whole council about this. So if we make this motion, then Tom says that, then we certainly can do that. But I get a feeling that he's not going to do that. So I think we're gonna be in good shape.
I requested Mr. Lee to give me the top 3 most visible and exposure in quantity media, aside from the e-newsletter. And aside from anything else that's sponsored by the city, as an email blast or a postcard, what more visible venues could you see greater exposure of this to? If there are even 3, maybe there's only 2.
I mean, I would definitely look to social media. Social media is gonna, if you do a public post that also has like a public notice to it, typically we can see traction of 20,000 viewers on some of those, that when we do a road closure, you amplify it. If we actually amplified the message and paid to do it, and you could see hundreds of thousands, but then you're not getting.
We're not getting
well.
prospects.
So like we have to be very targeted in the
Well,
approach of who gets it.
West News Magazine is a good slug of 33,000 people that might look at it if it comes to them in their mailbox. Facebook is a given, it's free, so that ought to be not part of the big three. That's an automatic, no matter what it is. And then if there's a,
Eureka Ledger too.
the who?
Eureka Ledger goes out to.
Yeah,
a
well,
lot.
you're in that one this week. As a matter of last week, you saw that.
What if we did it, what if, this is just a suggestion, what if we did it this way? What if we had suggested that, you know, either Tom engage Paula or Paula can do this on her own, where you know, she can reach out to the Eureka Ledger and West Magazine and sort of implore them that an article like this is necessary. And in the event that they were to disagree that it is a necessary article, there is something that's called native content that comes with a price. And then I can assure you that that price is well within the city administrator's spending authority. And so to the best of his ability, he can figure out if that is a worthwhile avenue to take. I would suggest in this very limited case, it probably is, but I would defer to his authority to figure that out.
And this is with your permission, Chair, as a aside, last year when this occurred, and it might be, it's actually kind of, it's earned media. KSDK ran a story and interviewed the former mayor about the issue and how the governor had vetoed it. And then this could very well be something where we could get some earned media, we wouldn't even have to pay for it. So in this case, if you'd like, with committees, comfortability here, we would be more than happy to reach out to some media outlets just to let them know and provide the information that's provided in that message.
What's her name, June?
Okay.
One of the.
You put me on the spot.
Tracy.
Tracy, yeah,
She's a Wilder resident.
she is.
Yeah, highway two.
And she actually interviewed Mayor Garitano and I earlier this year about Cox Creek right next to the anniversary.
Yeah.
So it's,
She'll be in when they start building those houses.
I would, I mean, this is just me, I would suggest that we need to start yelling this from the rooftops. I mean, any and everywhere, we gotta start talking about this in real world terms. Do you want a motion, Tom, or are you comfortable?
let's go ahead and a motion to, if we could wrap a motion into advocating this simple fact of what just happened. Well, I just defer to the letter. Messaging what was included in that original email
Oh, yeah.
to as many people in the public through as many channels as possible, directed to staff.
Mhm.
That's really, that would be nice to have a motion with.
All right, let me make sure I got it all in here, and then Amy doesn't have to try to write all this down.
And I bet there's a lot going on now that the governor has granted tax breaks on the top end after he vetoed all of the city monies for everybody or all the municipality monies. There's probably some controversy that could be done in the newspapers over that.
All right, so let's see if this makes sense here. I move that the Administration and Public Works Committee formally acknowledge and disseminate the letter provided by the city administrator regarding the governor's line item veto of the previously approved stormwater funding allocation. This communication shall be shared not only to all council members, but be made accessible to the public via the city's website and any other means necessary as part of the official record. Further, the committee may request a future agenda item for review and operational and fiscal implications of the veto for long-range stormwater planning. How's that sound?
What he said.
That makes sense, Tom? All right, so we have that made by Mr. Mabry. Anybody care to second? Tracy? He's gonna second.
Your
Excellent
turn,
job.
your turn.
Any discussion or questions on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. That motion carries. So that ought to be a whole lot of fun to get out. I think that'll be great. Up next, we've got our master plan update. Tom, I assume that's also you.
Yes, and we also have Mr. Vunich here too, if he'd like to share some information about just the process, but overall, to give a little background here, earlier this year, the department had put together a way for council members on each individual sitting committee to provide direct feedback on the goals, objectives, and policies that are listed in the current update as master plan, which was from 2016. The idea was to provide literally a point blank copy and then allow each council member to review it and provide direct input on each goal, then objective, and then policy, and then work that in. into a summary and also just provide the actual data itself to the citizen oversight group that's currently reviewing these processes, specifically the community services and transportation elements. And from there, we have a little bit of we have put together a synopsis tonight. Just wanted to read through that. One's a major consensus, but the secondary one is more of a in-depth feedback, summary of the feedback. But overall, the feedback consensus that was received tonight, you'll see that there were all the ones that were turned in by last week were included. The Administration Public Works Committee shows a high degree of cohesion across the master plan response set, while stylistic and tonal differences appear in some answers, particularly around technology priorities. There's a broad alignment on foundational principles such as fiscal responsibility, contractor oversight, capacity conscious development, the preservation of Wildwood's community character. This alignment provides a strong platform for the committee to proceed with implementation strategies, confident in the shared values guiding its work. So that's the consensus. That said, if we want, we can dive into a little bit more of the summary of the feedback, which is included in the memorandum tonight. If there are any questions, or if we want to read through that, more than happy to do so. That said, this tonight is to get feedback and then also to request a motion to package this and then distribute it to the citizen oversight group for the review of both the community services and the transportation elements.
All right, so I know Mr. Lee read that pretty quickly in case you guys didn't quite catch on. It basically says, while we have a couple subtle differences here and there, more or less, we're in alignment. And so certainly we can discuss each one if you guys want, or I think we can just say,
We can
let's
just say
send this to the people.
distribute it to the
So
citizen.
however you guys would like to go. Mr. Martin.
So I screwed up. I didn't send mine through. But I have a couple items I'd like to see added someplace on there, and this is, kind of falls back under the utilities. I don't know if you all noticed, but your fire hydrants are rated. Green is over 1,000, yellow is 750, and under 500 is red. There's areas where they're putting new hydrants in that are under 250 gallons per minute. So I just think there ought to be some opportunity for us as a city to get to the water company to ask them where they are on water pressure for the, for the fire hydrants and those plugs, because you'll see when a line breaks, they'll come in and, now we're at least 30 years old. So there's a lot of that infrastructure that probably needs to be repaired. So not only for the water, but I think the same thing holds true with some of the natural gas stuff. And then likewise with the sewer stuff. So somewhere in the whole master plan, we talk about utilities, but I think considering we're getting an older city, we ought to really try to figure out how can we get the buy-in from the water companies and these others, because you will see them out there tearing everything up, but then they put a brand new hydrant in, a new water line, and it's the lowest rating that you can get. I mean, you can't run a fire truck off 250 gallons a minute. So for those, the next thing will happen is our home insurance will start going up because the water pressures are too low. So that was one. The other area that I think that boy number 3 did an outstanding job, by the way, in those comments, but I would like to see us really focus, and this is more setting and listening to some of the master or the citizens over review thing. I don't think they have a clue as how the finances work for the city. And so every opportunity that we have, everybody wants you to go and buy things and do things. But I think the more we can explain to them, and I don't know what that actual number is, $112 or $113 per year per person. You can't be spending millions and millions of dollars on things they think are nice. And I just think we're guilty in letting people constantly bring it up without any constant reminder that all of these great things that we want to do have financial restrictions to it. And I started looking at different places to put it in there, and I kept cutting and pasting it. And I figured that's just not going to be a nice way to do it. So they'll just do things that, and I'm sure they'll be in there, and we'll see later on. But I just think I guess this is the third time I've seen this. I think that we have an opportunity to make some things a little simpler and to hopefully get anybody who decides to read it to buy into the fact. So thanks.
Yeah, I like that. Anybody else? All right. So then Tommy, you would like you need a motion, I guess, to push this forward?
Yeah, a motion to push forward, and then also a motion with that motion to also include the feedback, and we'll add it after the fact, to work with the water utility companies to figure out I would probably say a goal to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need more than just me. I just think it's so noticeable when they have a water line blow out the next day, there's a new plug with a lower rating. So it tells you the pipes underneath there are not what they should be. So I would make that motion if you have it.
All right. You want me to come up with a fancy motion, Tom, or Amy, are you guys good on that one?
This one.
Alright. Motion made by Mr. Marshall. Anybody care to second? Pushing this forward, seconded by Mr. Albers. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor of pushing this forward to the master plan committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that brings us to our monthly reporting templates.
All right, thank you, Chair, and we do have Mr. Boonish here who can respond a little bit to the code enforcement side of things. What else? So really tonight, the idea is to share what our police department is, police precinct is currently sharing on a monthly basis. After speaking with the court, we're still ironing it out, but just to get the ball rolling, the idea was to start recording this starting July 1st and then start bringing reports back in August. So tonight, the idea is to provide just the general categories that would go under each with a sample of the code enforcement reporting. That'll also include a little bit more of a general summary, but then with the court reporting as well. That said, I will note there is slight differences when the original motion last month and the motion tonight. And the reason for that is it ties back to the fact that we have one prosecutor and we have one municipal judge. Typically, we can provide some general operational reporting, and what is included tonight is the how we would break out the cases. So right now in the monthly report showing that financial side, this is speaking to the courts, but it will break down cases by category in the future, by traffic, code enforcement, general ordinance violation, and then also the domestic assault cases. Typically those domestic assault cases do get kicked over to the county. So just as a heads up, those will typically be low. And then the key statistics that are almost, and I'll tie this in a second, that are very fair to request are the number of convictions, number of active cases, new tickets summoned in that reporting period, summons filed, warrants issued, and the number of closed cases that in that reporting period. Those are all very safe, if you will, after the Ferguson updates that were made back in the 2015 period. But the real reason why we're a little bit more limited, we have one judge and one prosecuting attorney. And if we require too much detail, it could be conveyed that we are collecting the information to somehow sway decisions and what some have called court monitoring. So we have to be very careful. So the difference between that, what was originally requested and what we're still kind of ironing out, if we can report on it. So let's say, let me get this back up. There's no also problem tying the data together with repeat defendants. Like if there's someone that's consistently coming back, we can note that there is a strategic nuisance, for instance. So that's not a problem, but where it becomes a little bit more of an issue is the like giving specifics on diversion alternative resolutions, like what did the judge specifically decide to do? The average time from citation to resolution. We can typically do that, but that will need to be explained a little bit more, and that could be something that gets included in the summary section. Also on top of that, the cases with victim advocacy referrals and DV related cases that can be provided. We don't have too many here, just as a heads up. Now was one other one I want to note. The number of continuances also is not included in the memo tonight, but can be included. That said, there will need to be an understanding that a continuance can mean a plethora of different things. It can mean someone requested an attorney, someone didn't show up, the judge said, hey, we'll pick the case. Or it could literally just mean that they paid that day and now they're going to hear the case at the next meeting. So there's a lot of different interpretations of a continuance. So we just want to make sure that that information is shared properly and makes sense. So still looking into it, but this is the base statistics that we can definitely provide in the state safe category, if you will. Where this ties in is for this code enforcement and police reporting, and the police reporting is already showing this, but showing the year to date and also the previous month. Obviously, we're building up that reporting data as of this moment. So as time goes on, we'll eventually have the data present in the categories that have been agreed upon to be able to start showing that comparison. We can work on ways to make that a little bit better looking too, like the police have been doing with the actual graphs and tables. That said, the idea would be to have some first round of reporting coming up here in the month of August, but just wanted to get feedback on this initial round, what needs to be added, what is absolutely necessary, and what isn't. Thank you.
All right. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or concerns?
I feel bad. I got a couple.
Sure.
Any way on the court records, just to tell us how many are getting transferred to the county? I didn't print that off, but I don't think it says on
I
there.
don't think that- I can check, but
And I just think it'd be interesting for us to know that of all the cases coming in, 23% or 40% get transferred to the county judge to deal with, and they always have that right to do it. The second question would be, and this is kind of Mr. Vuni's question, is under the reporting for the code enforcement stuff, would we be able to track the number of rental inspections that are being done, you know, not only from the county gives us something, but then what we issue that? I just kind of think that would be interesting for all of us to know about.
Certainly. And obviously, we just initiated the program, but we can certainly provide you that information. And I apologize, I think there is something missing from that table. And when Mr. Farmer and I had a conversation about this a while back, we were both, I think, concerned about privacy, not putting someone up to public ridicule. But we also, I think Mr. Farmer's request that we could do it by ward,
Mhm.
so you could have an idea of what's going on in each individual ward. That's not on this table. It needs to be added.
Probably don't want to know.
Well, then we can also take it off the table.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Anybody else? I think the word thing is a good thing. I also think, I was thinking about this mostly because I've been dealing with it for the last couple of days on the rental thing. What do we do, if anything, if a rental? It's good to know how many inspections we're having done, but it would also be important to know like which ones are failing, because I don't know how we, like, I know in my neighborhood, the HOA has to approve a rental, not the person. And as part of that, it's like, you gotta give us your certificate from the city that says you've passed this inspection, but I'm just wondering if there's some type of a notification that we need to give to somebody about that so that they would know what's going on.
That data is captured by the county, and under our contract with the county, we have access to it, so we can include that. I think obviously an inspection's requested, so we can track how many re-inspections are required to bring it into compliance.
They could have 100, you'd only have 80 that passed, and then there'd be 20 that passed the next time. So I know that when they came in to pitch it, they talked about being able to track that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I was thinking about the specific one we were
Yep.
going back and forth on, and I'm like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, and first and foremost, what we're trying to do now in that particular one is to understand with the lease information, was that leased after we implemented the program?
Right.
And if so, did we miss it? And if not, then obviously we have some other tools.
I think in that specific one, I don't think he told anybody what's going on, because I know how that all shook out.
So the rental component will be added, and then we'll also do a general geographic distribution.
And then I don't know if it's possible to do, but I think we also talked about, Joe, like trying to figure out a way for people to understand, or at least for us to understand, like, if there's a problem property, we don't have to necessarily identify the specific address, but like, it would be good to know if there's 3 code violations written somewhere, that it's always this place. Like, it's just, it's not like we're randomly out doing this. I had a conversation with a resident today who had a whole stack of code things, and she was very confused, and I was like, my understanding is they're gonna come out and talk to you about one thing, and if they find 12 other things, they're gonna write you up on those too, so you can get them all taken care of at once, rather than fixing one and coming back. And so that made a lot of sense to her, but at the same time, it would be good to know, like, we've got a couple places where this is just a repeat issue.
And we can certainly say, let me talk with Melanie, who is our MyGov expert and also our rental expert, see what we can come up with. But yes, sometimes we got a complaint from a trustee about a dilapidated fence.
I got 2 calls on that one. She said, don't worry, I'm working
So
with Mr.
when we
Mooney.
visited, obviously their trash cans were visible from the roadway.
Right.
They had some dead vegetation, they had overgrown vegetation. So yes, a number of notices were issued when we really just went out there to look at the fence. So it happens sometimes, but we, again, for the newer members, we primarily base our enforcement off of complaints. We don't necessarily go looking. Complaints keep us busy, but when we do go to a location, we do the thorough inspection.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, that way, you know, we'll know if there's 24 of them, but 12 of them were at one place. That's just a good thing for us to know what's going on.
That
And
could be
then,
a parenthetical. 6 of these were at one location.
yep. And then the only other thing I noticed, which I talked to Tom about, and we're gonna talk to the captain about, and Ed, you're on public safety now, right? So you can take this up too. Well, I like this report that the police are giving us better than what they previously gave us. It's also not, it's still not super clear to me, and there's some, as I told Tom, there are some pretty interesting discrepancies in some of these numbers, so I,
Almost need an index at the bottom.
I mean-
I can't figure it out.
yeah, like, you know, when we're, and I, you know, I greatly appreciate everything the police are doing for us, but they do take up a very significant portion of our budget. So if I'm looking at this and then seeing we haven't had a 43% drop in self-initiated calls, I don't know if that's good or bad. I just perhaps a sentence down in there to
Two less
explain.
officers, does that work? Yeah, I don't know.
It seems like they were doing a lot of calls, it was those two guys. So we're gonna work with them to get that figured out, but other than that, I think that this is a pretty good start, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is to kind of allow this to evolve as we move forward, so that's a good thing too. So if anybody has anything else, or Tom, you need a motion, or I'm just good?
As long as there's no significant changes other than, you know, just the items that are added, that's fine.
I think it's great. Awesome, all right, moving on, capital improvement budget.
All right. Chair, with your permission. Tonight, wanted to provide an early notice, just as we're kind of not quite there yet, but usually the capital improvement budget's the item that we really like to dive in, especially with the discussion we're having on erosion funding. Wanted to kind of put together what projects are currently tied directly to funding, which, and kind of show, you'll see a couple different charts in the attachment tonight. One that shows the fiscal year 2025 budget, the anticipated, so some of those may be corrected as we get further into the year, but then showing 3 additional columns, well, 4 additional columns, but 3 additional for 2026, which shows 2026 current, which ties back to the capital improvement sales tax fund 5-year program, not the fund, 5-year capital. The anticipated, which shows there's 3 changes that were made for the additional payments to MoDOT that were needed for the Route 100 improvements, the J turns and the left turn lanes. And if you look at that attachment, you'll see the exact denomination added, which was $293,000 for the J turns and then $337,000 for the left turn lanes. To make that project proceed, we had to push back some projects, which included pushing back the Green Pines Park Connector Trail, the construction of it, and then also pushing back the resurfacing of Anniversary Park's drive aisle and parking lot, along with trail development for the year. So all those items, when you see the fiscal year 2026 anticipated, you'll note that those dollar amounts were pushed back to 2026, which does change the overall dollar amount that's listed. And then the last column, the fiscal year 2026, just without a good way of fitting in a good title, we called it V2. And the department is noting these are the current projects listed in 2026 that are tied directly to federal funding or an external funding source that we would need to proceed with. One of those being the, and you don't see it because it's in 2027, but the Bridge 387, 386. Those are tied to federal funding, but the construction isn't planned until 2027. So tonight, we're really focusing on other capital investment, bridge and roads. This is something we'll be sharing with the Planning and Parks Committee as well for the parks side. That said, we can even go through this tonight, or we can let everybody kind of take a quick peek at what we have tonight, get feedback, and then bring this back next month to kind of do a deep dive. But either way works best for the department tonight.
All right. Mr. Albers.
Just, I was wondering what the pilot program is on the sound mitigation?
So that is something that has been requested, and it would be looking into the addition of sound mitigation walls on Route 100 and 109 to control for sound.
For the pub? Well,
No,
with
that'd
pub?
be for the interchange, just general traffic noise.
Okay, I didn't know if it was related to that ongoing thing. Okay,
I don't get, I mean, Clarkson Road couldn't even get it through for Clarkson Valley, and they're 150 feet closer. I just question if it's
How
even
much
practical.
complaint we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we did a lot of sound studies and
The house, where the homes are, it's not a problem, right?
Actually, there are certain areas along those two arterial roadways that do exceed the sound levels, but not many. One of the locations is between Forest Leaf Parkway, Taylor Road Extension, those homes that back to Route 100.
The old,
So the
that old
thought was
evergreen part, right?
to see if we could do some type of pilot to address that sound, and if the pilot was successful, could it be a future future projects of a similar nature? One particular council person advocated for it. It was included in the budget. But as you know, we've identified it as a potential source for the assembly of the SLR cabinet.
Mr. Mabry.
Okay, nobody else is talking. I'm not gonna frame it as those people knew what they were building or buying their house next to when they built or bought their house next to what that is, which is called 100. It's a super highway. I'm not doing that, but what I'm wondering is, can there be anything else, if it's gotta be a pilot, that can represent an improvement? Whether it's a dished 6-foot tall air deflector that does this instead of a 40-foot tall concrete barrier, or can there be foliage? I thought of this the first time I ever heard of this, and I was thinking, don't these people know what they were building or buying their house right next to when they bought or built their house right next to? What are these people thinking? So is there any other alternates besides the giant wall?
Well, certainly there are alternates, and the consultant that we engaged from Rockford, Illinois, Dr. Thunder, gave us a list of potential options. The worst case scenario is, his recommendation was, don't approve development within 200 to 300 feet of the edge of right of way. And so basically, we're taking property. And so the point would be is, now are we having to purchase it? The most effective tool, according to Dr. Thunder, is, as you described, a tall sound wall mass that blocks the sound. And Rick knows this better than I from his years at MoDOT. What I will tell you, though, is the area that had been considered for the pilot, that was rezoned by St. Louis County in 1977. The relocation and the new 100 came after that. So there are a few people that actually, they got a surprise.
But nobody in
No, No.
that development we're talking about.
Well, I mean, how long ago did they expand that road? That was in the 90s.
82.
Yeah, so
But that when the city incorporated, that Evergreen was the oldest subdivision in there with the highest density.
Right.
And then the road got wider.
right, no, yeah,
So,
that part I get.
But they didn't know, I mean, obviously at that point, but Brightleaf, I don't think there's anything about Brightleaf that should be a surprise. I remember walking, it was just a field. Who would buy this if you know, and there are people that doesn't bother and the house is quiet, so.
Yeah, I mean, my thought when we did the study was I sympathize with the people who are the road expanded, but I'm also just going, I'm not sure how many people are left that bought a house in 1980, before 1982. That's gotta be a,
I honestly have not had anybody from Evergreen make a comment about that at all. That's to me. I know that initially Deborah had people in Brightleaf, but I've thought, as you have all these trustees over there, they don't seem to think it's a problem, you know. The homes are built differently too, but the Brightleaf one I'm sorry, the Evergreen ones are much older build and everything down over the hill there, but I've not had anyone make it an issue at this point.
so let me ask this just so I can make sure I'm clear. So Tom, on this
For cars.
breakout here, the fiscal year 2026 V2, is that just that's just talking about the money that,
That's like money we need to spend to honor our current external agreements that tie to federal funding, so if we.
so
were
we have
not-
two items, right? That is right.
Well, no, Wild Horse Bridge for the right of way and the right of way for both 386, 387 are both tied together. I would make it into. road-
We have $1.5 million out of $8 million.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. And tonight I have just a quick equation in here. If we wanted to add ones back in, I can show what that does to the net revenue versus expenditure, but tonight we can either kind of let everybody take a look at this and then come back. The suggestions, I know we got these out a little bit late. That said, if not, we can go through these today too, either way.
So I just have a question, because we have Strecker sidewalk segment C, E and F. Where are those?
So those are currently not
I mean, like, where physically on the road are those?
all to Rick, but those are the ones that are currently tied up with some litigation that we're in.
Yeah, I get it. So that looks like $300,000.
So if he comes in to develop, he would have to put that in himself, right?
You bet.
So there is the developer is looking at something, and if he did it, he would have to put that.
Well, so I mean, and this is maybe, and I may be the only one, so for those of you guys that are new or old or whatever, and I'm just the guy that doesn't quite fully grasp how this works, that's okay. Like this Strecker Road sidewalk thing has been on the budget for a while.
30 years.
So, so my question is like, I don't expect us to have the ability to do this anytime soon. So why do we continue to tie this into the budget if we're not, if like we know we're not doing that?
Well, the thing is, if that case were to get settled, it would allow for funding to be available if there was some type of settlement where, hey, you're gonna, not without getting into the case too much, but if there was a certain agreement that came up with the impacted individual where maybe they do some of the things that we have asked them to
Yeah,
do.
I get it.
And then we say, okay, well, we'll cover a portion of the sidewalk or we'll help with the sidewalk.
I guess what I'm saying is like, so we have, I'll just call it roughly $300,000 in this budget, okay? So if that were to happen, then we have all of next year to figure out what we wanna do, and then couldn't we just reinsert this in 2027?
We could 100% do that.
So I guess my question is, for like a lot of these items, I'm unsure why we keep an item in the budget that we know we're not going to do if we have other items where we can spend the money. And then is it a fear that we're not going to put the money back in? Like, I'm not picking on Deb, but I'm looking at the $40,000 for the sound wall. That is the least of the problems that I think we have, including the people in that area.
So, and I can answer for representing those folks over on Strecker for 20 years. Those people were told in 1997, there would never be a sidewalk in there till that development took place. A few years ago, when Mayor Boland said, let the council members set priorities, Lauren come up and said, hey, we have to have these sidewalks. Well, those people wanted them back in 1997. We said, no, not until when a development goes through, then we'll do it.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's kind of where our position, I don't believe as a city should be. We're gonna go in and buy right away, buy ground and put something in when it's really a developer's issue.
Or we, I mean, my thing is, I'm kind of with you on that, but even if we did decide we wanted to do that, specific to this location, we can't do that.
Correct.
So I don't know,
Why
I
it's in
don't
this-
know why we keep putting this on there. It just seems like it ties up a bunch of money for no reason.
It is in our strategic plan. So it's exactly
on
what
that
you
other-
said. It was
So
something
fix
that,
that next.
yeah, so it's whatever that discussion then heavily was concentrated on keeping this in. And like you said, it gets removed. There is fear that it doesn't get added back when the opportunity.
So I guess a question for Mr. Vayner or for Thomas is, whenever we have this and we take it back out of the capital budget, then when we come back and decide that's changed, we want to do it, are we in violation of not having it in an approved capital budget 5 years ahead? That we keep saying that it wasn't in the capital budget? Is that anything to that, or is that just self-inflicted?
There, I mean, you want to have a decent 5-year capital budget. You want to set those priorities, but if the council, if something comes up, the council can add it at their.
I mean, the sad part is that we're gonna make decisions on things that aren't as pertinent just because we put in a 5-year plan. So I don't know how, I just always remember anytime somebody wanted to spend something that wasn't in there, so well, you can't do that because it's not in the capital plan, 5-year plan. But then we put things in the plan for 10 years and never do it.
And the idea tonight, but also in general, to not include, I didn't include the 5-year plan here, or the department didn't, was to kind of get away from the mindset of, you know.
And I didn't, I just brought that up to ask the dumb question.
Yeah, you're
Because I
exactly
think-
right, though. The council each year reviews the 5-year capital plan. Obviously, there's gonna be, staff will have some discussion topics if you're saying, hey, let's move this, if there's already been a ton of money spent on engineering and design on a certain project, but if we haven't picked up the shovels yet, or the pens up yet for a project, then it should be fair game. And even if we have spent money on the engineering, there could be some serious repercussions to future awards But the council has the discretion to fund what it.
That answer, I was just curious that we didn't get ourselves to where we create a bigger problem down the road.
So let
As
me,
I know it, that's the reason for
Yeah.
both Ward 5 and Ward 2 as to how those things got in there.
so does anybody want to go through a specific item or if not, I have a thought on maybe how some of this would at least help me figure some of these components out. But Mr. Vanek, I see you got some questions.
No, I'll pass.
Okay. So I will say, I like this, what you guys have presented a lot more than what we have seen in the past, so that is a very good thing. I would maybe suggest that if it's possible, we figure out, like, I would do it almost as like a tiered system, so like, obviously, the stuff that, you know, we have federal money or whatever, we have this $1.5 million that we have to spend because we spent other money, that's an important thing. But some of these other items, so like, I'm just gonna keep picking on pickleball, I guess, but like, we've got our pickleball court in here again at $500,000. It is on the strategic plan, I understand that, it shouldn't be, in my opinion, but whatever. But like, to me, in terms of, that would fall under you, right, Mr. Bruner's, that's a part. So what I would suggest is, if it's possible, to go through, you know, like the pickleball court, the phase 2 Village Green, the repairs here, whatever it is, and rank them in 3 tiers to say, like, I know nobody understands, and I'm not just saying this because it's in my ward, I think the parking lot's fine, but like, the parking lot at Anniversary Park has got to be resurfaced this year. For whatever the reason is, I don't really care, but whatever it is, like, that is a tier 1 priority. So then that helps us understand, like, okay, now we know we've gone from $1.5 million to 3.6 or whatever it is. And then Rick, I think if you can do this, like, there are certain things obviously that we are tied to lots of federal money on with that, but like, you know, we're not, certainly the roundabout has to go through, because that's like things that have taken forever, or helping us to understand even from like a process standpoint, like how much have we invested thus far? Because the other thing I think we run into is we spend money on stuff that maybe not everybody's quite understanding what we're spending money on, and then it's like, well, I mean, we've already spent $80,000 on this, so we don't wanna just let that go to waste. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm sure we've spent some money on the Strecker Road sidewalks. They're not getting built. I know that for sure, for an extended period of time. So that I think would help me to figure this stuff out. Same thing with, like, you know, Rick, or I assume it's you, Rick, like the sound mitigation pilot program, like $40,000 isn't in the city budget, isn't an enormous amount of money. But you know, what we did on Old State Road was, I think, like $400,000. So that's 10% of a project like that. And that to me makes a lot more sense than trying to build a bunch of walls that nobody's gonna care about anyways, and they're just gonna bounce the sound somewhere else. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if anybody thinks that's a good or a bad idea.
Would we wanna try to define tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 right now? So then we could use that calendar to.
I mean, we
So
can,
tier 1, I would just, to really call it out quickly, tier 1 would be that we spent significant funding already on it, and that it is tied to, it could be the external grant partnership, or we spent a lot of money on it already. Tier 2 is we spent a little bit of money on it, and there's no grants tied to it. Tier 3 is it has nothing tied to it just yet. So it's literally, it is an open discussion. But do we want to also tie in like resident feedback, or, I know there's just some things that come up with.
I guess the one thing that I just think that would be nice, and these guys, nobody knows it better than what they know it, but I think exactly what Joe was saying is to be able to prioritize it. But there seems to be that every couple years, something comes flying in and we didn't even think about. And then we have to go back and cut out stuff that we did plan. So is there a ballpark number, maybe it's 10%, 15%, that we kind of earmark as a contingency for those type of things that either overfund, you know, that they're more expensive than what we thought or not. But I also agree, I think this is the best, and we're in the best time ever to start talking about this. This idea coming in, you know, for a night in November is not the way you do budgets. So I just think that it's a good start. you guys, I think, could prioritize and say, okay, here's one. So the parking lot's a good example. If it's $25,000 to reseal it now, if we don't do that for 2 years, is it gonna be $40,000 to have to replace, more pavement? So I mean, that's the kind of
That's exactly
thing
what
where,
we're-
we get a year here, but we need to move it up a notch then next
Like we
year.
pushed off repairs to City Hall because nobody didn't wanna spend the money. And then it got worse and worse and now we're hurt, even like, that's what I look for is like advice, like, okay, it's here and yeah, nobody wants to spend on this, but if we don't do it, it's gonna be not only the expenses more because costs are going up, but the damage or whatever, it's gonna cost us much more. This is a critical item to get done this year and next year, like pond school repairs, like, I don't know, what's wrong with the pond school? Does it need it really badly and
People use it.
get water inside of it and it's gonna destroy what's it? I don't know, I'm just saying it, to understand what the city feels like is a priority from a maintenance standpoint, I guess.
And we can come back with just like, I know that I literally, the department just provided a blank, like, here's what grant funded and grant type projects, but we can come back with our recommendation for just 2020.
And I think that's great. I think you've done a good job putting the
Yeah.
dates in there
Mhm.
and that type of stuff. So I just think this is a great document.
I also think, and I kind of piqued my interest a little bit at the last watershed meeting. But we were talking about doing the detention basins, and I think Rick, you were like, I mean, there's still some more engineering that needs to be done, like. I don't know, I have no idea how many rounds of whatever something takes, and if we're having, if you do this and then you find something else, it's like chutes and ladders, and then you gotta go back and start over, so. Like, for me, if we're doing this, like, if we've done engineering on the Stratford sidewalk, and that was 15 years ago. Is that worth anything? Like, is there a time period that those things last, or is it just like if we are spending money on this thing and we don't get this done within 5 years, there's no reason to spend money here, because by the time we get there, none of this is gonna make any difference. Those things would help me out a lot too, just because like, I don't know how many times it takes to look at these things, or, even like, when we're doing the roundabouts, like we were doing engineering and then it was more engineering, and I'm sure all the engineering is necessary. I just never know how much engineering is left or whatever. So I think something like that would really help too, just to go, like, to try to give, a person that doesn't do this every day an understanding of like, this is part 1 of 15, and this is, normally it takes this amount of time, so you're seeing this every single meeting or every single year in the budget to understand the full process, because right now I still don't understand why some things take forever and other things like pickleball show up and all of a sudden we're gonna drop a bunch of money on this thing. Cause Dan Flasher wanted it 5 years ago. That was the deal.
I think that's where the department heads could really help
Keep track
us
how many times.
look at how to do those type of things, so that we're not, and I'm sure that they're doing it.
Mhm.
It's just another one where I don't think that half the council people even look at the numbers.
No.
So then the money gets through there, and then we sit there and say, wow, we can't afford this. Until you start cutting stuff, nobody thinks it's a problem. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't think we should have a reserve as big as it is. But I think we should be very selective on how we want to use one-time money for big projects. And I'm as guilty as anyone. We saved and we didn't do things, and we saved, but we do have money now. So I think we probably need to look and say, okay, all of that scrimping that we did, was it the right thing to do in order to do that? But I think the department heads are the best way. And we as a committee and a council, anytime somebody throws something out there, it's gonna cost money to do a study, we just shouldn't jump on it. We said, well, wait a minute. And I think that setting those priorities would really help us make better decisions, but.
And I mean, I also think it'll help you guys when we put this board action request thing will help too, because I mean, we did this a little bit with the gate thing. I mean, that even based on the residents, that came from seemingly a specific council person that created a whole lot of work for not a lot of results. So we gotta be careful about that stuff too. So from a action standpoint, do you want us to try to come up with like some clear tiers, or do you guys, I mean, I would think that they might be different for what you guys do because it's kind of different stuff, but I don't know. Mr. Mabry.
Are we at a point we can make a motion, or are we still asking for the departments?
You can make a motion if you want.
I move we give them the reins and we take exception. not that we bark the rules and then they quibble about, oh, that's not the best thing in the world. And what you're recommending, but don't have that.
Yeah, I mean,
They're pros, they're gonna be here long after we're all gone.
Yeah,
And
I
they've
mean,
lived with it for 30 years.
my thing with this is if it's like a 3-tier system, I don't care what your guys' tiers are. If you tell me it's a tier 1 project, then that is a Joe Vunich tier 1 project. And Rick, if you tell me it's a tier 1 project, then that's what it is. If it's a tier 3, doesn't make any difference to me why they are those things. I don't spend my day doing that stuff. So it would just help me to know these are the most mission critical items that have to get through. And then maybe these are the things that would be super great if we could do it. But we understand there's some other stuff that's going on.
We'll have to farm the justification when we create the tiers.
Hmm.
So we'll be able to answer your questions. Why is that a low tier or a high tier?
Yeah. All right,
That said, one thing too,
Yeah.
so we do put aside monies for stormwater management each year. That said, you know, right now we have 300,000 set aside this year to kickstart a project with the anticipation that we were gonna get 250,000 additional dollars. But moving forward, we had kind of had a placeholder of like 500, then 250, 500, but it's just because we didn't have kind of a consistent revenue source for it. Is there something tonight that the department should be aware of so we can work with that? That's the big kind of, when I'm looking at this and I'm trying to figure out how much can we set aside for City Hall and trying to fit it all within, I mean, the main problem here is that our capital budget specifically is we've got too many projects on deck. That's the true problem here. And we're gonna have to make some cuts if we want to keep it, you know, below
Chair.
the hoop.
yes, sir.
Mr. Lee, so you're telling us, and that's fine if you're telling us, there's gonna be a whole lot of items in tier 3. That's what we're looking for you to tell us.
Okay.
Pick from the tier 3, but don't let any of the tier 1 or tier 2 go by, according to the city's expert opinion. But you got these 14 tier 3, go ahead and pick any 3 of them, that kind of thing. But that is a whole lot more sanction and credibility coming from you than I think that you guys see daily coming from all of us who just want to get reelected.
Yeah, and I mean, I would even, I'm not necessarily advocating for this exactly, but I'm just, like, I'm looking at our 2026 budget for watershed erosion. We got $500,000 in there. So we have money still this year, right, left over. How much do we have left over from this year's?
Most of it.
Okay, so if we don't, here would be my question, if we don't spend it $1 this year on watershed erosion, that then theoretically gives us 800,000, right?
In theory, it would go to the ending fund balance, so it doesn't go anywhere, it's saved, so in that
Like
case.
that.
But that said, the one thing you always gotta keep in mind when we're doing budgeting though, is that will make the overall budget look weird because that 300,000, even though it wasn't spent this year and we're technically putting it aside, saying, hey, we're gonna save that for next year. Unless you have a contract and you encumber those funds, it's going to show now you're negative 300 in the hole for fiscal year 2020.
Yeah, I
As
mean-
long as we're okay with that for this specific fund.
This is my thing and I am but one person. I don't care about budget awards or any of this stuff.
Well,
It doesn't, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not glad we win them or whatever, but like, to me, from a factual statement, if we don't spend $300,000 and we move it to next year, we have $800,000. If we don't do the sidewalks, which we're not going to do, we're now approaching $1 million.
And I still keep coming back. I know it's really great to have this big reserve, but it's not good to have a big reserve when we can't operate the city and we can't take care of things that are gonna cost us 10 times more.
Right.
And it's been that, Jonah, it's been that way for 15 years. And you keep saying, when do you think, well, we oughta, and it's, the grants are great
Yeah.
and all this, but guess what? Somebody has to maintain all
Well,
that
she said
stuff.
we should spend 50% of it, roughly, right?
Yeah, so we do hold, and this is a legal mandate from the state, we have to keep 25% of our general funds, so that's just an operating contingency.
But we put that in years ago as well.
Yep.
A good example, Kerrs Mill Bridge went out. It was out for what, 3 years? The county had no money to put it in. And the Wildwood residents had to drive around. So I mean, those are water erosion problems that anybody who's lived here very long can tell you, oh yeah, I remember that. So I mean, part of, I think, but I honestly think if we do a good job of trimming up this and get the priorities right, I'll go to bat for going into the reserves to take care of those things that are our fault. Water erosion, city hall, whatever those things are that shouldn't go in and had been cut out of the budget because we were going to have a balanced budget. We did that for 25 years and now we have an excess budget. Nobody's gonna vote for any additional support for us because they'll look and say, well, why are you doing that? You have all that money. So I just think we ought to be sensible enough to look at it and say, okay, if the decision is from the water to get in front of it, we need to take $1.5 million out of the reserve. What is more important?
Right.
Than correcting that problem? And you know, now what I don't know is how much that would correct. But I don't think we should drive it back around. We can only do 300,000 or we can only, what steps could we do without any funding? If we get the funding, then it doesn't become a next year problem. It's down the road. You have that opportunity to lay it out, so.
That works for us. I mean, you
That
guys need to-
$1.5 million out the 7 basins that have been studied to be retrofit.
And maybe to fix the budget issue, we got 300 grand, I don't know how much it costs to engineer the rest of this thing, but something tells me it's gonna be right around that number.
Well, and then you could look at it and we don't have to do it all in 1 year because
Sure.
of the time it would take, but I just think it's kind of like the deer thing. If you don't put it in the budget,
Yeah.
then you keep coming, well, we have to cut that out. And we did all the cutout on City Hall and look what we have now.
Right.
You know.
All right, so Tom, do you need anything additionally from us or are you good?
We'll come back.
Do you think we need a second? Mr. Mabry made he made this motion. We didn't get a second and we didn't take a
Right.
voice.
I don't want to do every motion.
Oh, well, I can't, but the motion
You
needs to
got
go back.
Dominic.
Amy, will you repeat the motion that you got?
I don't have a motion.
Oh, all right.
It's a jumbled, it's
It kind of a motion.
It's an assemblage. We'll get it in
Was
done.
the-
You can
my
withdraw it,
understanding
Bob.
Was that,
Yeah.
Withdraw it.
with your permission, Chair.
Withdraw it.
Create
Yeah,
a
'cause they
three-tier
think
system,
they're
and tier
okay.
out the current project listed for fiscal year 2026. Bring that back and then pretty much make the argument what do you need for each of these?
Yeah.
So we
And
just,
I didn't hear what you said. I was,
To break out a three-tiered system and then define those 3 tiers and then take the projects listed for the 2026 budget for capital and then list those out, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So show how we're getting there with a write-up for those tiers and then show what is needed for each of these projects, even if it's different than what is currently listed.
okay, I thought I recalled you saying that it'd be good to have a motion, so I jumped in, but
You're making it. That's the motion.
That was the motion.
that was the
That was
motion.
my interpretation.
I said it did.
And now, okay, so there was a point where I thought I heard someone say that we don't need a motion.
Well, we're gonna do the motion.
We're gonna do the motion.
So if you're cool with that motion,
Yes.
you will make it.
I liked
and
it exactly as I heard it.
Tracy's.
Tracy will second it. All right, everybody clear on the motion? Okay, all those in favor of our 3-tiered system and budget continuation, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. Up next, communication policy for substantive changes to committee motions. Tom, you want me to do this real fast because it's starting to get late? Okay, so I wrote this thing up and Tom did a good job of doing a little bit of this here earlier today when it came to our sheets from code enforcement and things like that. The idea is when an item comes from a committee or the council, and then it needs to come back around, if there are whatever the substantive changes might be, if it's legal or whatever, the staff is still fine to make those changes. They just have to point the changes out and tell us what they're doing. So in the case of the reports from the courts and things like that, we asked for a certain set of things. Not 100% of those things came back the way that we asked. So Tom is saying, hey, here's why this didn't come back. And here's what that means. So that way, everybody is understanding what's going on, so we don't go into something thinking we talked about, we're doing this thing, and then it turns out to be the other thing. That makes sense to everybody? Anybody have any? Yes, sir.
Chair,
Mr. Mayor.
it's because I remember it happening before, so that's why this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, I mean, it happens all the time for a lot of different reasons, and, you know, in some cases, like especially if we're talking to John, there's some legal reason we can't do something. That's totally fine, they'll just say, hey, legal reasons, and we'll go in a dark room and talk about why those legal reasons are, if we need to do that.
The biggest, well, I interrupt, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
The biggest repetitive instances of these with latitude north 38 or 9. Pretty disconcerting to find out that something's written down as either a recommendation or an agreement that I didn't remember it that way.
Yeah, and some of those, I mean, that gets a little weird because you get I mean, in that case, I think the developer was coming back seemingly the day before meeting and changing whatever was going on. But the goal with this is, it's not really to hopefully create more work for our staff, but it should just be like a pretty clear, like, hey, you guys asked for this, here's what we're doing, here is why, and then we know what's going on.
Well, I interpreted this as when there is a change, it isn't a smelly thing that we discover after we take the lid off.
Correct.
It's, hey, there's something smelly, it's under this lid and here's
Yeah,
what it is.
it's kind of like a red
And
line.
we're prepared for it, we'll get over it,
Correct.
but not when it's.
I took the words I remember. I think we should redline those or change the color of the ink. So when you make a change in something, change it to red. Mr. Green, you do an outstanding job in updates. When you go in and read the updates, you can see everything happened in the last month is in red fonts. Boy, it just makes it a lot easier, because then you can think about, oh, okay, we talked about that, and it reminds you. So I don't know if that's possible to kind of work in it, but I think it just makes, because you spend a lot of time looking through these reports, and then you're trying to, did I see it in that page, or did I see it back? And then I start printing this stuff out and going back and highlighting, I said, oh, wait a minute. So that would be helpful, I think. I think this is great. I just think if we could highlight a little bit to say, when you do make those changes, send it back to us. I don't know, we have to put it in the outgoing public document.
Right.
But I think that it would be a good way to remind us, this were the 3 changes that you made last, especially if it's coming back to the committee to look at, so.
All right. Anybody have any other thoughts on that? So we have yes, sir.
Just, as you know, if a bill is introduced at city council and there are amendments, you'll usually see it a month later as an amended bill. Typically, the changes are highlighted so that you can see that what your input provided is addressed. And then again, a lot of the reports that were prepared by Tom, Rick, and I, we highlight the changes, we add editor's notes. So if there's something we're missing, I'll be the first to say I'd like to know, because then I can add it.
All right. So we have you want the proposed motion, Tom?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So the proposed motion is, I move that the Administration Public Works Committee recommend that the city adopt the following protocol for all council-bound motions emerging from committees. If any substantive changes, technical, legal, or otherwise, are made to the language of a motion after it has been approved by a council committee and before it is presented to the full council, those changes must be clearly documented in the council work session packet and verbally identified during the council work session by the mayor, presiding officer, or appropriate staff member. A substantive change is defined as any alteration that modifies the intent, scope, enforceability, or impact of a motion, policy, or legislative action that includes but is not limited to adding or removing policy requirements, shifting the authority or burden between staff and residents, converting between ordinance and resolution formats, altering timelines, thresholds, or applicability, modifying procedural safeguards, or enforcement mechanisms. This protocol is not intended to limit staff or legal edits, but to ensure transparency, alignment, and legislative integrity. The operating committee's work must be respected and accurately represented to the full council. This protocol shall apply to all council committees. It may be formalized by the city administrator or council via resolution, administrative directive, or inclusion in the council manual as appropriate. Anybody wants to make any changes to that or make the motion? Happy to.
I don't know, you said operating on here, it says originating.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Maybe I read it wrong. Oh, I did. The originating committee's work. Got it.
Just making sure.
Bad read. My bad. My fault.
Okay.
So anybody want to make any changes or make the motion?
A little more discussion.
Sure, man.
Some of the, so I know you have the standing committees. Will this work in economic development?
I mean, depending on what they're doing, I would think so. I mean, most of the idea would be, like, for instance, having just started on there, like, we have the sign ordinance thing that we're talking about. So we had a whole bunch of conversation about the sign ordinance, and then we sent it off somewhere. And so then if that comes back and it's now kind of like substantively different, that's not to say it's wrong, it's just to say, hey, when it left here, this is what it was, and now it's come back and here's what it is. That's kind of how I.
Because now it's sitting over P and Z for 2 months.
Right.
And then when that gets out of P and Z, then it'll come back again. Will it then go to economic development, or will it go directly to the council?
So it'll go from planning and zoning commission, the city council, And the Planning and Zoning Commission's already received the motion as approved by EDC as part of their last work session packet. So
I mean, I would suggest in that case, like,
I'm
if
just curious. I'm
if
not
P and Z
picking it.
accepts the motion, great, or if they alter it, then it would be. This is what they got, this is what is now coming back, so number 6 is different, or whatever it is.
anything that comes to council to Planning and Zoning Commission has to be addressed. So as you know, it wasn't ignored, and if it was changed, why it was changed. That's typical process. I'm worried, does this happen often?
Well, I think it, I mean, it happens more than you think. I mean, we've had a couple, there's a handful of times with previous folks that it was happening a lot. So the idea is just to ensure that we have it, I mean, if there were a policy on the books, it would have been easier to go, like what we were talking about with the money for the watershed and the internet's a good example of that, where like everybody left the room with one understanding and then we showed back up and it was like, no, it's a different thing now. And that was the extent of the explanation.
I understand now. Thank you.
So yeah, so I mean, I think for the most part, I think you guys are doing a great job. This is more just a process so people actually, when we're all not around anymore, it's.
We don't want to screw up the work you guys are doing.
Right.
That's part of the problem too.
Also offer that if we present something, you know, a template, and you don't like the template, you need to let us know.
Right.
Because we want to get it right, so it's easy for you to understand, and then it helps you make your decision.
All right. So. Do you want any more discussion? Want to make a motion? Want to make some changes?
All questioned out. I'm good.
Mr. Albers, Hennick,
Huh?
Marshall,
What,
is it your turn?
to make a motion? Do we need a motion here?
Yeah.
Oh, just to accept, make a motion to accept?
Unless you want to change the proposed motion, you could just say, we'll go with the proposed motion and I'll email it to you.
Yeah, I make a motion to go with what Mr. Farmer just read. If that's
Mr. Phoenix, give a second. Everybody's getting on the Dan here. Okay. Any more discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that one passes. Up next, we've got our communication standards for city projects and development adjacent activities. Tom, you want me to do this one too, or you wanna?
You can introduce one, I can add.
Okay, so this is an item that is, I think is kind of a long overdue thing here for us. There's been a couple issues that the city has dealt with. I had one with AT&T when they came in and did some things. We have different road projects. Wild Horse being closed and not, or whatever, was another good one. So the idea is to really make a very concerted and clear effort as to how we are going to communicate these kinds of projects out. So as like in my mind, even as an example, like I think I saw them today either doing sidewalks or roads in my neighborhood, which I'm very appreciative of. And I did read it in the city administrator's report last week that they were gonna be doing it, which is great, but like, we don't have to keep that a secret until the week before it's done. We can put those things out. So the idea would be, like when roadwork or utility activity is scheduled within a subdivision or a high traffic corridor, clear communication in advance, social media posts, email notice, website updates, things like that. I think over the years, at least last time I even suggested, like, we can get a little sign we can stick up where people can hit a QR code. It takes them right there to say, hey, we're resurfacing these roads over the next 2 weeks, so be prepared. Ideally, I think, especially now with Paula in place, this is probably gonna be a thing where I would assume, unless Tom disagrees, that, we can lean on her expertise on how to get the word out. But the idea is to get the word out widely and appropriately as much as we
Well, I
possibly
think it would help us to target that to the subdivision trustees.
Sure,
Because it seems like it's always a one-sided event where they call us and say, hey, is this going on? Where we'd have the opportunity to get their names and their emails so that we could, go in and say, okay, next week or whenever. That way, when they get asked, they'd be able to answer that too. So.
Yeah. And we've done a little bit of this. We did it with, I think, Tom, you did it with the LaSalle thing, where the idea is like, when we have some very large piece of property that people care for, go up, there's not a lot we can do, but we can say, hey, this is for sale, and if somebody were to buy it, this is what technically is allowed to go there right now, but we don't have anything to do with it. We're just putting the information out there so that the kind of like crazy talk cycle doesn't kick in.
Frequently asked questions.
Correct.
Newport.
So yeah, I don't know, Tom, you got anything you wanna add?
The main thing I would say is some things, well, bigger trends, like if it's our road work, I just wanna speak to a couple of them. AT&T, like that first one, they definitely roughed it up a bit. We were able to iron that out. So that said,
Yeah.
we kind of know when fiber projects are coming in, we've learned quite a bit, what to conclude. We have a good process in place. But like the one like Wild Horse Creek Road being like actually that signage issue. That was one that we were communicated. I would just say when it's out of our control and it's something that we can communicate what's given to us, but
Yeah.
for that specific instance and things like it, MoDOT says, hey, they're only closing the westbound leg of it. You can get through it though and make that right as you're coming up north. But then they put that sign up that has the exact opposite information. We actually did contact them and say, hey, stop that, turn that around. And I would, and once we're notified of it, I would just make sure that it's some things we might even be led astray to staff.
Yeah, I just think like those kinds of things, I mean, it's important for us to communicate like it's a MoDOT thing. We don't have anything to do with it. This is what they have told us. And so it's just a matter of getting those things out.
To be honest, they don't tell us.
Well, and then we should be
That's the honest
communicating
truth.
that,
Yeah.
is
They
that, hey,
don't tell us, and most of our partners don't tell us either. So we're doing the best we can to communicate what we know and what we're able to find out. But they don't communicate it to us directly in most cases.
so I would then say our communication out needs to be exactly that. Because like for instance, I mean, whatever they were doing on the sewers on Clayton Road today, I'm certainly glad that they did it. But it was a bit of a mess up there, and I'm certain they didn't tell us they were doing
For
anything.
example, nobody told us a thing about that work. We drove by it this morning too. I
Yep.
have no idea what.
Like I noticed they put up new crosswalk signs by Lafayette. I was expecting those in 3 years, so I was excited, but there they are. So I just think like we need to, much like we talked about earlier with Tom's letter about the line item veto, like we should be honest with our residents about the fact that our utility partners, MoDOT, the county, whatever it is, they don't communicate with us the way that they're supposed to. And so that is why we are not able to communicate this out, because what winds up happening is our residents internalize this as something we are not doing, which we aren't communicating it out because we don't have the information. But if we did, we should get it out as best we
And
can.
I think when we don't have it, we should tell them who to call.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, I think if people, I just know with the Rockwood thing, man, the ones I know have been trustees for years, they'd already called the school board. And they were quick to call and say, hey, the guy retired and they're tearing up the street. So, I mean, in that particular situation, when it's out of our hands, just let them know that this is what most of them have a pretty good understanding
Yeah.
of how it works. But I think any place where we don't get it, when they start getting people reaching out to them, then they will in turn realize that, and we're never gonna be perfect, but I think we could help be better.
yeah. And I think it's important too, like for our own internal things, like, if we're spending a lot of time or getting a lot of calls on something that it is not our problem. Then I think it is important, whether it falls on deaf ears or not, to communicate back to wherever that agency is to go, hey, like we are fielding a lot of calls about things that we don't have anything to do with. So if you could do a better job of communicating it to us, that would be great, because we just spent 45 hours of our staff time dealing with this thing that we don't have anything to do with. So this, I think, is more the concept of, giving you guys in the city a genuine functional voice in terms of how these things work, and to try to get ahead of the problems, because even in limited areas like my stuff, it's always somebody's mad that something has happened, not that something is going to happen, and then those are the harder conversations to have. Does that make sense to everybody? So, Tom, is there anything that you don't like in here or you wanna?
For our stuff, I think we're fine, and if we're okay with, hey, you know, and I'm fine with also recording if we're getting calls on something, or if we're getting mud thrown on us for a specific thing that maybe didn't require a permit, but they just did it. Maybe you should have gave us a heads up. I'm fine with noting that as well, and then communicating that out, hey, we're hearing about this. That said, if we're okay with just saying, here's who to contact, we typically can know who's doing it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just, you know, even coming from my office, they don't tell you. Ameren's really getting better, I will say. Ameren's getting a lot better, but I mean, it sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get the information. If it's our project, we should be communicating it out. I'd say that's the least expectation. And I
Not
think-
gonna be perfect, but I honestly think when people are faced with that, they'll realize that. And even if it just becomes emails coming in. If they get 10 or 12 emails from people, they'll say, you know what, maybe we didn't do a good job communicating that or however they do it. So
And I mean, I
I would be
would,
perfect.
I would maybe look at, I noticed it like the way that Mayor Garetano put some things out, specifically like when, you know, we had the vote about trying to get Clayton Road resurfaced, and then the next day they were out there patching 6 spots and everybody got excited and it was like, oh, just kidding.
And he should have gone 2 days later when they restriped it. There's no fun, there's nothing gonna be redone.
Nothing more is coming this way.
As soon as I saw that, I thought, nope, that's it. It's all good. It worked.
That's exactly.
So,
That's a good kiss of death. Yeah.
Mr. Mabry.
I'm just dovetailing off of the earlier length of time we invested in our first topic, communications, the city's communication to its residents. The right, and the obligation of the residents to know what's going on. It's their obligation to be a part of the city as much as it is our obligation to educate them or to inform them. So is there anything about this, Mr. Lee, that you consider adds more to your plate than benefits your staff's time and resources and value?
No, I think,
You think we should go, and I'm adding, or you think we should go further and say, in spades, everything you're doing about educating about this upcoming referendum for ballot measure, do all that in spades for everything else that we're discussing about this particular action, so that you can just, whatever you're doing there, do it again here. And you've got the sanction, you've got the direction or the mandate. Do you like that? Or is it just more work for you?
no, and I think that overall, it's, when we have the information, it's good to get it out, and I think it's our responsibility to share that information with the residents. I would just say to call out the distinction in with the erosion issue. I mean, that's something we can easily share, especially since that's gonna be completely controlled by us. Especially comparing other cities, we won't necessarily share how they did it unless they share it with us, but we'll be able to say, hey, here's what we're doing. But some of these issues like the Clayton sewer issue, I mean, you know, that's something that we had no idea. Once we know about it, we can share it, but just understanding there's limitations, because that said, and I'll just point this out, with the communications manager, I think it is gonna be helpful. But I will say just operationally, sometimes when these things pop up during the middle of the day, and if it's an emergency, we do drop everything. You know, usually you sometimes will get Rick, Joe, and I, all three, you know, responding to a situation depending on what it is. That said, sometimes if it's, you know, a low level, you know, we might just need to keep training Paula up on it, just because it can disrupt the normal day-to-day operations if it's almost like categorizing what this does it here. What rises to the level that it needs to get a social media post, a spotlight on the city website. Potentially, we have the ability to do an alert on the city website. Do we do a special e-newsletter that blasts out that's not on its regular schedule? And do we do a mailer or something, if it's something that's long-term? And those are questions that we ask, but typically we do try to get out. You know, when we did get info that MoDOT was like closing the interchange for the repair work, we got out the schedule that they gave us. That schedule changed. So we have to just be very careful. Once again, saying, hey, MoDOT's overseeing this project, and kind of having that caveat, because we had bad weather, they then changed their schedule, and then that schedule we still had up on our social, because we can't delete the post. That said, folks that might have seen that later in the week, they ended up thinking, oh, it was closed last week, we're good, but they were actually starting it and they didn't give us an updated schedule. So it is frustrating for us, because we want to get the information out for projects that aren't ours. I think our projects and projects we have access to are oversight power. We can definitely build off that, but I just think with the external partners that maybe do things without telling us, that those can sometimes sort of curveball and add more work. When we're kind of, well, when we're doing our day-to-day, it can be very disruptive.
Maybe just use some corrective wording in there based on at least the last information from MoDOT or something like that, so that you're at least communicating what's been communicated to us. And I think a lot of the ones where I see where you put them in are pretty good, weather permitting. I mean, everybody kind of knows that's a change. Big compliments on the roundabout at Wild Horse and
Yeah,
one
people
and
like that.
Right.
Larry McGowan told me he went through there 6 times yesterday and not once was there traffic.
I
He said,
don't
no
know.
stop sign. He said,
No
I just want to sit there and keep going around.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is on the, I don't know if this is the appropriate place for this, Tom, but maybe what we do is, we either, lean on Paula or your expertise to tell us like, I think for a long time, the city has tried to communicate in every avenue possible. And in my experience doing that, you just communicate poorly everywhere. Instead of saying, hey, we're gonna try to get you wherever we are, but this is, if you want this information, this is where this information is. So here's the link to come back here, or here's whatever it is. So maybe what we wanna do is we wanna figure out, or have Paula figure out the methodology that makes the most sense. So, like to me, these kinds of things going in the Gazette probably don't make a lot of sense because that's, 6 months at a time. Well, I would love to communicate out that whoever was doing, MSD was doing something to the sewers on Clayton. I'm assuming that they're done today. So it was an inconvenience today, but like, that's not exactly the same thing as like communicating to the HOA, like, hey, we're gonna be resurfacing all your roads in 2 weeks. So if people start calling you or whatever, you like put the onus of that communication somewhat on the people that are in that space rather than taking it on as the city.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that is appropriate. If we're sending, I will say, if we're sending out mailers, we're gonna put a QR code that gets them to our website, but if it's another party, I would almost say lock it in on, we'll do a social media post about it. Every time we get a water main outage or water repair work that we see, we get the notifications, we have them all set. If anything, this phone rings for a million different things. If it rises to the level. We're usually gonna do a social post. We're gonna create a spotlight that'll be active for about 48 hours, depending on the instance. And then we'll put it on, if it's big enough, we'll put it in the e-newsletter as well. But that's typically it. And then that spotlight, which if you go on our website, there's usually 8 at a time. We try not to go over 8 because it can be clunky and take the homepage a long time to load if you have too many. Big enough emergencies, you can have a banner across the top. I would almost say, I'm almost thinking about this, we almost have like a weekly roundup or something like that, that's also shared.
You could maybe call Ellisville. I mean, they have some sign like our public notice sign size, it looks like, that's just a QR code and it goes to whatever website they're deemed to go to. But I mean, it's like, if they're having like I was even thinking that even with like our public notices, like the one up by me, it's like, it is technically there and that is what we are required to do, but you gotta stop your car, go get the piece of paper. It's tiny, like if we just if it's possible to just say, here's the QR code for public hearings, and it just takes them right to a site. I think that is significantly easier from a staffing perspective, other than updating a website, than going and putting out a sign and making sure you have the right brochures. And if the brochures are gone, I assume we have to go put more out or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, for public notices, I think there are some legal requirements. That said, if we have one that just has, here is the history of it's gonna store a lot of data. But if we had to limit, like, hey, we remove the one that's, 10 after, we do 10 at a time, after the 10th, that one gets removed, but the document doesn't get deleted for record retention purposes. Obviously, we keep the notice elsewhere. Because we'll have a copy of it, but we would just have a copy of the notice. I mean, that wouldn't be an issue. I also don't think we can create a page too that says, hey, like the weekly roundup or like the very important news that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a spotlight, which the spotlight is like kind of, it's either a nice achievement or it's a pretty big deal or like a road closure, stuff
Right.
like that. So we could incorporate something different. I can check out what Ellisville has as well.
I think they have a phone number on theirs too. I mean, when they put their signs up, because if you can't read them very well, I think it says contact City of Ellisville with that phone number. And then when you go to their voicemail, it will, you know, you could click on and then it tells you, that's the way they were doing it. So I mean, that's pretty antiquated, but do you know if they still do that for their public notice, Joe?
I don't know.
The last one I saw was just a QR code. And I was
Okay.
like, that's weird. I thought you had to be a
Yeah.
little bit more specific than that.
They do have a page, I'm looking at it right now. They do have a page for all their public notices going back all the way to 2014.
There you
It's
go.
like a public shared drive.
All
Joe.
12 of them.
Yeah, right.
They still don't want Kmart down there.
Okay, does anybody have anything else they wanna add? Yes, sir.
Some of the things we do are code driven.
Mhm.
So, and just remember, if the code says we do it this way, that's the way we do it. And that has to do with postings and public notices. We can change the code if that's what that's the direction you all wanna go, certainly. And in terms of certain processes relative to permitted uses in our zoning districts, the code's clear. This is how we process them. The notification to the individual council members, that's certainly something we can do. We do a development trends report every month for Planning and Parks Committee, and then it is forwarded to the city council thereafter. There's a better way to do that. We often tell the Planning and Parks Committee members, let us know.
Sure.
We'd love to hear from you because it's a new report, relatively speaking. When we first published it, we made some modifications based upon input from the committee members, but if it's a better way to do it, let us know. And then finally, sometimes what I think is important may not be to you and vice versa. Sometimes what I think isn't important is important to you. So have a measure of mercy because we're not gonna be right all the time. And that's not because we're trying to hide facts or not be transparent or pull one over on the residents. It's just from our perspective as professionals, we see things a little differently than someone that lives on a subdivision street in Ward 3. So.
Well, and as far as the count, you can't force council people to read that report either. I think that's a great report. But if you sit there and people start arguing about stuff, it's in the report. I mean, I just don't get that part, but they won't take the time to read it. They'd
And
rather
the
pick
same
it.
with the residents, you can put it out a lot and they're still gonna say, we had no idea what, well, you gotta look. So a lot of it is on the residents too, because it's out there somewhere 99% of the time. They just don't take the time to look or don't maybe know where to look.
I'm just
Honestly, I
saying,
mean-
if there's a better way to do it, you can figure it out, let us know, because we're more than willing to try. If it doesn't work, we'll try another way. But I know Travis works very hard on it, and then we edit it a lot before it even goes out to the committee and then city council, but we want to make sure it's correct. But if there's a better way to basically present that information, please let us know.
Well, I mean, I think this is covering a different topic though, Joe. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we could probably take this and convert it into a quick URL on the city website, so you're not having to do any extra work. It'd be something we can have Paula automatically do
That's fine.
once a year, but then this literally shows, and they have no excuse, we can link this on the homepage and say every permit that is approved this year, or this month, is right here, click. And if they click it, I mean, it is a little reading, but there's a beautiful, it says what ward, it says the date of it, it tells like a couple summary words, you know, is it a fence? I mean,
I have
it's
had
right here.
trustees call and thank us for having to turn around that the thing was approved or, you know, they applied for this. They said, we never had that before. That's just fantastic. So I.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot more emails about, I don't know
Yeah.
what you guys changed, but I started
And
getting
I'm
a
not
lot.
exactly sure what they're thanking you for, but we don't get them that often, so. But they all said that, you know, the permitting process has really helped some of the trustees because now they know that it was done the right way and that they have that information too.
You know, maybe a bit of communication. I don't think our trustee list is very up to date, so I don't know if that could be communicated to.
We've done a couple drives in
Have
the
you?
past to
Okay.
say, hey, it was like, it almost dominated a lot of our major communications to have HOAs updated. We have a form on our website that says, hey, you know, this helps us connect with you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I will say, we did that, it was probably about a year ago where we re-pushed it. And I'll be honest with you, I thought, you know, hey, we just need to give this a good push and it'll get updated. We did get, you know, like 15 or 20 folks that updated it and we now have something. What we've been trying to do and what I do personally, and I've talked with a couple of the team members here to, when we talk to HOA members, we try to convince them to do emails based on their, like their HOA@gmail.com, whatever it is. Then that never, I know it's not great to password share or anything, but if there's 3 HOA trustees, if they all share amongst it, then okay, maybe you just leave it with one, that's the president. But that means someone is constantly feeding into that communication channel, because right now, when we use them, we try to tap in and leverage it every time for deer management. We just don't get a response, and it's usually, oh, that person was a trustee back in 2010. And they,
It takes a lot of work, but I also believe that if we were sharing information with them, it's a much better reason. One of those people who live there will say, oh, here's the 3 trustees, and they'll give you their name and address, phone number. That's how I get it lots of times, to say, hey, I'd love to get your trustee, they won't tell us who it is.
I mean, I'm looking at our list, the Villages of Cherry Hills doesn't have any trustees listed. Neither does the Villages of Winding Trails. I'll send you guys emails, because those guys are usually pretty dialed in.
Cherry Hill doesn't?
It's not a great list.
Yeah, it's.
well, it's based off the form, so it's like, it's self-reported. We don't go in, if we get a notification from the form that says, hey, someone updated this, then we say, okay, and then we have a designated.
Well, when they
person.
call and complain about stuff, I just always say, this is a great opportunity. I just want to confirm who these people are, and you do get some of them. I mean, it's just, it's not gonna be perfect, but it does kind of cut down on the complaining.
Okay, so, if you would like, I have a proposed motion we can make that gives you guys the flexibility to wiggle with this thing a little bit, if you would. Okay, so it is, I move that the Administration Public Works Committee recommend the development and adoption of a standardized communications protocol for capital projects and development adjacent activities based on the key points and checklist outlined in the communication standards for city projects and development adjacent activities memo. Staff are further directed to return with a draft policy and implementation timeline for review within 60 days. Do that. That sound good for everybody? I think that gives you guys the freedom to figure it all out. All right,
It's Tracy's turn.
Tracy,
Yeah.
Oh, it's my turn.
it's your turn.
Okay, I move that we accept that.
You will make that motion? All right, motion made by Nyan, seconded by Mr. Mabry. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, cool. That brings us to Mr. Brown. Status report on MoDOT improvement projects.
Thank you, Chair, committee members, appreciate that. This is the update we've been providing you for a couple months now. I wasn't going to go through this in detail. I would mention to you that the memo says we're going to be resurfacing on Taylor Road tonight. That's already slid to.
You need an umbrella.
A big one.
So anyway, the resurfacing has slid and right now it's scheduled for Wednesday, but with the rain tonight, it very well may slide again. So that's the challenge we face, unfortunately, trying to communicate these things, but Taylor Road should be resurfaced soon, followed by Manchester Road, and then they'll go back hopefully and do Village Hills Parkway during the day. So the Manchester Taylor project is moving forward, and the signals are almost completed, but not entirely. They do have to put luminaires on the signal posts, but they're not been delivered to us just yet either. So there's a few cleanup items that will still remain after the resurfacing is done, but it's approaching substantial completion. So, and as you mentioned, the 109 Block Road roundabout has been substantially completed there as well. Traffic seems to be operating well. I've been really big things. I myself noticed that as well.
People know what they're doing.
Hopefully when the coming back and the school starts up in the fall, they'll continue to do well. So that's a welcome improvement for sure. Are there any other questions you might have relative to projects that are underway that you want to ask? Not?
I think I got my answer as I went on through the agenda. Valley Road was moved to 2026, but that's because you end up now having to go back and get the right of ways. Is that correct? I mean, before that was scheduled for 2025, later this fall, and now I see it's, yeah, your project expected to do it is in 2026.
Construction, yes. We have, and as we're going to talk about shortly, we have to acquire 10 easements on that project. So that will take I think based on past experience, a good part of a year to do, so.
That was my question, then I read. Got the rest.
That is correct.
Not to sideline this too much, but we talked about the right of way thing, right, Tom? You and I, changing the way, looking at changing the order of doing that.
Yes,
We probably should put that
Or
on a
specific-
different agenda.
yes, but specifically for federally funded projects.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just federally funded or any of them. I just don't know if we want to maybe talk about that as a group later, just to. So we don't, I mean,
Do we have to talk about tonight?
no, we can skip, we can do it next time. I'm just saying. We may be doing it right. We should write this down.
That's the way, and just as a quick note, it's right away is the most tedious, at least from my perspective. I'll let the traffic engineer speak to that, but that said, it seems like it's the most, it has the most variables added to it because you're not necessarily just paying a contractor to produce X product and then you have it and get it reviewed, it's good to go. It's, you add in people, which can, as you can see in some instances lately, can add some layers of complexity. That said, the idea would be the way that tip apps work is there, and it doesn't really matter if you have right of way acquired. I mean, Rick, I'll ask you, I mean, would that increase our score if we submitted the application that had the right of way acquired? I mean,
It can indirectly, I think, is the answer to that, because when you apply for federal funding, essentially, the less you apply for, the less you're asking for, you're probably increasing your odds of getting funding. So if you wait, and this is what we've talked about doing, essentially, when we do apply for federally funded projects, we're gonna maybe wait a little bit longer, do more work on the front end, and then maybe get the right of way acquired in advance, and then apply for construction funds potentially. That way, we don't struggle with the schedule, because the schedule is very restrictive when we get those federal funds. And then we have more clarity in terms of what the construction cost is, because we clearly are challenged. We have been very challenged over the last 5 years estimating these projects accurately when we put in the funding application. So if you wait later, you have more conciseness about the amount of money you need. And the schedule is much easier to meet in terms of expectation and just achieving the progress.
the one hit on that is that you don't get reimbursed for the acquisition. So the city's paying out of pocket for the actual cost of the land, whatever it is.
But as I mean, we'll talk about this in another meeting, but like when we were kind of running the numbers, it's one of those things where like the number winds up being pretty nominal that we wind up paying in order to make the process much easier. And also, I mean, in my thought process was, it's probably better for the city to just have more right of way anyways for us to do things. So in places that we can, like, let's be proactive in the thought and go get it, and then not just everywhere willy-nilly, but figure out if that's the right spot to go.
So my question is on Valley Road, and we may get to it later, is being over for all that time and all the properties over there, I just, could the subdivision give you the common ground? And who would do the legal work on writing that up? Because I don't know that you have to pay for it. If they think they're gonna get a sidewalk or they're gonna get better improvement, most cases, they're just struggling who they're gonna get to mow it, you know, so, but I'm just was curious. I don't know where all the places are along there, but I do know over the years, and Mr. Mabry can take that, but for 20 years, I know all those people and their problems, and there are some there who will probably expect you to pay for something, but there might be some who'd be more than, oh, you know, if we're gonna get a sidewalk here, we'll give you that ground. I don't know, just curious if that's something that we could do in lieu of having to buy it from them.
Well, yeah, I think that in the traditional process that you try to engage with and ask for the donation first and then offer to go out.
We can, and we have asked for donations, and certainly if there's an HOA and it's minimal impact, certainly that's feasible. We could do that. It's just when the ask gets pretty big, it's difficult to do that. And then if we're gonna do it, we need to be consistent, do it with all the property owners, and that's very difficult. So then if you don't, you're paying some and you're not others, and that's what I struggle with a little bit. A lot of times these are fairly nominal payments, and a lot of times the payment is just, you know, honestly compensating them for their time and impact of, you know, you're gonna be challenged when the construction occurs, and I need you to look at this and review it, and approve it, it's just time spent. It's a lot of hassle, frankly.
I just know my old subdivision, Powders Mill, there is no common ground in the front. Those are actually the homes own that land. And that's why there's no, there's no sidewalk along Valley Road, but that was done by Flower Homes. It was a lawsuit 30-some years ago. So I think there are some of those situations, but then they have all of that common ground down around there that they pay to mow. And actually, that's where we moved the creek over onto their common ground. So I don't know if there's a way we could help with that. It just seems to me that sometimes when you go in and you're trying to set up a meeting when they know somebody's gonna be willing to pay them something, where maybe you could see if the legal work could be done, you know, if we could do the legal work, they didn't have to pay for that. I don't know, might be an option.
Well, we can certainly keep that as a possibility.
All right. So is this just information or you need something from us?
That is an informational item, Chair Farmer.
All right. Up next, we've got, I mean, I guess that was kind of Valley Road, right?
Started to talk about Valley Road, and that's the next item on the agenda.
All right.
So as was referenced by Councilmember Marshall, we are moving forward with our Valley Road project, and we have completed preliminary plans and designs and received environmental approvals, and we have identified 10 properties of which we need easements in order to construct the project. So we'd like to move forward with that process of acquiring those easements to allow us to construct the project. So to do that, we did obtain 4 quotes from 4 companies to help us in that process of raising those easements, putting together potential offers, contacting the property owners, developing the easement grant documentation, getting it recorded, and all the things that go into that process. It is a lot more than you might expect. We hire companies to do it. It does help us a great deal in public works, keeping things moving forward. So right-of-way acquisition is a little different than engineering. It's not considered professional services. It's the same manner. We can get out and out bids for the work. So that's what we did. We contacted 4 companies that do this type of work for us. One of them, which is O.R. Cullen, has previously worked for us. This time, the lowest quote we got was from Urban Planning and Development Corporation. Their price was $32,000 to do the acquisition work for us. So essentially, we are recommending tonight moving forward with a agreement with Urban Planning and Development Corporation to help us obtain the 10 easements for the project. The amount of their bid was $32,000. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Committee tonight.
Any questions? Mr. Marsh?
So that's a consulting fee. What do you think it'll cost us to buy the right of way?
Well, Mr. Marshall, we haven't put those costs together just yet. I think most of these easements are relatively minor. I would not expect them to be as impactful as the Old State Road shared use path. There are 2 sidewalk sections that we'd like to construct. Those 2 properties, those 2 areas, I guess, maybe a little bit more impactful there. Other ones are, you know, we're addressing a storm sewer that goes under the road. It may not have a easement currently, and we're thinking we need to add it, or we're extending it or doing some work. I would feel pretty comfortable we're gonna be under 100,000, hopefully less than that. But until we get into it, I really don't know for sure.
Just curious. I mean, this is certainly a cost, but once you get into this, then you gotta be prepared to pay the other for the properties, so.
Anybody have any other questions? Mr.
Maybe
Mabry?
you've got no bogeys, no heritage sites, or someone who thinks they've got rare canary birds resting there. None of that, that's weird as it has on Old State.
No, I'm not aware of anything. Again, we have gotten environmental clearances. That's not to say that when we get into talking with folks, I just can't predict how that's gonna go. Sometimes it goes quite well, sometimes it's a challenge.
So what about the property that's in Clarkson Valley? So everything from on Valley Road all the way down to that first subdivision is all Clarkson Valley. Then when you get down in the valley across from Thomas's where the log cabin is, that's Clarkson Valley. So will we have to coordinate with them or do we certainly will be buying easements in Clarkson Valley, would we?
It's possible. I'm not aware that we do have any that are physically in Clarkson Valley. We have talked about the need to coordinate more directly with Clarkson Valley and we haven't done that. One of the things that we may do is a public meeting of sorts. Probably would be worth doing that. Just to allow people the opportunity to get more familiar with what we're proposing to do. And that way we could also extend, an invitation to Clarkson Valley as well. So that's something we may want to do here in the next few months.
Because, there isn't a sidewalk from the Crestview Middle School. There's not a sidewalk to get, my kids used to have to, until they put the sidewalk in across the street, they couldn't even ride a bike or walk to school, had to wait for the buses. But all that along the school property, and back there's a guy who used to live over on the hillside, Charlie Wright, he wanted to put a sidewalk in there, and I kept saying, it's not Wildwood, you can't do that. Because he was then paying people to mow that, because the Rockwood School District was not mowing it, and a ball would come out of there or whatever, so that there's quite a bit of that is Clarkson Valley, until you're halfway down the hill. They're across from Sun Meadow, it's about where it shifts on that other side of the street, so. Just curious.
The sidewalk sections that we're proposing to do are on the other side of the road. It's the section opposite the middle school, where it stops all the way up to Clayton Road, filling that gap in.
Yeah.
And then putting the crosswalk, upgrading that crosswalk.
Because right now that crosswalk is where the sidewalk stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one is down near Crepper Mill, that last gap that exists, and those property owners we've spoken to them a few times and they're somewhat receptive, but it's difficult to gauge.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
So you need a motion then.
I just had a quick question on the contract. So within this contract, do we give them some type of an expectation as to how long they have to get these easements, or is this like a year-long contract, or how does that work?
Well, I think they have in here a general, I remember what I read, what their expectation is, how long it will take. But I will generally set the agreement up to give them a reasonable amount of time to get through the process. So I'll probably set, if we move forward with an agreement with them, I would set the starting date to be August, I was thinking August 15th through potentially June of next year, which is essentially our deadline to get the acquisition complete. So it would allow them enough time to get through the process of completing all the steps and getting everyone signed. And then at that point, we have to record all the documents and then turn them over to MoDOT for their inspection. So there's a long list of steps that have to be completed. That should give them enough time.
I mean, I don't know that we can do this. I know we've talked about it with the roundabout at Wild Horse, that like maybe for certain items like this, it's possible we offer some kind of an incentive for them to go faster, because I mean, my assumption is with that amount of money, they would like to get it done as quickly as they can. But if we can incentivize them to do it quicker, that gives us more time in case somebody's problem or whatever it is.
No, and absolutely, and we have to be clear with our schedule relative to the funding that we have so that we can get through all the steps in time. And usually they're pretty good about getting the initial offers out. It's just once that happens and it tends to fall into the lap of the property owner, things tend to get difficult. People vary in how receptive they are to the offer and how much available they are. So
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if legally we can do that on any of our contracts to say, hey, our expectation is, you got till June of next year, but if you can get it this by whatever, March, here's an extra $3,000 or whatever it is.
I would have to double check, but I think there's a way to do it the way you're phrasing it, if you were trying. There'd be a way that wouldn't be legal, but if you're saying, hey, here's the deadline, and if you meet this threshold, you get this amount, then
Yeah.
I think that can be.
Like, I'm not saying to use these other people's numbers, but like if we were to go with the most expensive bidder, it's $39,000. So if we were to say,
$7,000 more.
Well, we could go, okay, this is a, you know, this is, our approval is to not to exceed this amount of money. But here's how that money would come out. If it's fast, it happens this way, and if it's slow, it's this other way.
The other thing is, I think you would 100% need to incorporate something like that within the bidding documents for the proposals.
Yeah.
Because everyone would have that fair shake at getting this.
Yes, that's, and I'm just wondering if, not for this specific thing, but in the future, if that's a way to do it, that might.
Maybe it's something working like and I can talk to the city attorney about this, but it's like, maybe it's a percentage of the overall bid. I think it's not
Something.
much, but it's like, hey.
Yeah, yes, sir.
When I heard the word legal, I don't know what manner can we make it legal? There's certainly provisions in many clients I've worked with that they provide for value add voluntary alternates. And that is, it sounds to me like the way these dates are stacking up, as late as next June, you're going to theoretically miss an entire construction span by having to go through contracting after June, and then missing construction through the following next spring's season. So that the premise or the sanction for being able to legally request this, in some attorney's eyes, would be that here's your base bid to June, not to exceed. And you're then provided for voluntary, clients is the owner, a voluntary alternate ad for accelerating your deadline to March or to March. That gives us more time, another fiscal quarter for contracting, and then you're still capturing fall, which it shouldn't take much longer to build some sidewalks.
I don't think that'd be a problem as long as then the question would be, and I think we could definitely try it. It'd be, do we get proposals on it? Because if it also asks, do we require that you have that ad alternate too? That, hey, get it done by March. If we require that gets filled
You're
out.
allowed to no bid, and you're allowed to call them non-responsive and reject the proposal.
Hey, Rick, you work with.
I guess what I would suggest to you is that the right of acquisition process that we follow is dictated by federal law because we're using federal funds. I don't know there's a lot of chance we can do what you're suggesting if we're using federal funds. Because the process is quite rote, and the process that we have to follow, if we don't follow it, we lose our federal funding, so.
Feel they've already locked you out of that option. No.
It's established in federal law, and there's not a lot we can likely do to change it.
Clients aren't allowed to add voluntary alternate ads, are you?
Probably not. It's extremely regimented, and when we get done with the acquisition, we turn in a file for every parcel. And they look at every document that we've executed and go through with a fine tooth comb. So it has to follow exactly what their requirements are, and their requirements are very explicit and very detailed. If we're not using federal funds, that might be an option.
And yeah, that's, I can agree with some of that. And then also the other thing is, when they're looking at stuff, they're trying to cut our funding. They want us to lose our.
So when we do the money we spend to acquire the right of way, plus the cost of the consulting doing that, does that go into the total cost, or is that all city cost?
That should be reimbursable, but up to that amount that the federal government's covered, which is 80, I believe.
So engineering costs, right of way costs are all reimbursable expenses, as is the construction. So when you set your budget up, when you apply for the funding, you can request reimbursement for those expenses. But you have to put it all up front and estimate those costs up front. And the problem is it's very difficult to do accurately. And so frequently we do get in a situation where we underestimate those costs. And so we get a fixed dollar amount from the federal government that we don't exceed. So if those costs come in higher, then the percentage that we're getting goes down. It's like,
So if, for an example, and I'm just thinking of the ones that I know of on Valley Road, those are all, there's no homeowners association owning anything. It's all private lots from Clayton Road, the ones that there's no sidewalks in front of. My question would be is when you get down to like the one there at Peppermill, the private property owner, if they elect not to sell it, can we still get the federal funding, just not put a sidewalk in there?
Well, it does get a little tricky because when we applied for the funding, we said we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. So if we drop off the Z, we generally go back to East-West Gateway and say, we're not doing Z, can you please let us know that that's A-okay? And sometimes it's not a problem, but sometimes they might say it is a problem and you're gonna lose your federal funding, so you better not do it. That can happen.
I'm just kind of curious because I think that's part of that whole time lapse, how long, it takes. I'm thinking a couple of those owners, they have actually died and I don't know who actually owns the property now, but other than that, I don't think that they'd be unrealistic in the fact that it's gonna happen. But the longer you wait, and if it's that contingency on the back end, so that's fine. I think we need to do whatever, but it is kind of interesting how what's in front of it, the cart or the horse. It just kind of seems sometimes it's backwards. So are you looking for a motion to move forward with the recommendation from the department?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Made by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Mr. Vanek. All those in favor of moving forward with the department's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. That brings us to our roundabout bids.
Council members, Chair Farmer, next item is relative to the construction of our proposed roundabout at Route 109 and VA South. As you know, we've been working on this for a few years now. This is another federal funded improvement project. It is of course on MoDOT's system. We'll install a new roundabout at that intersection. And we do have 1.36 million in federal funds that have been obtained for this improvement project. We did open bids for construction of the project recently, last week. We did get 5 bidders responding, which was a good positive for the project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction, about $2,468,000. I'm not going to read the entire total. The second lowest was M&H Concrete Contractors, which was about 26,000 higher, or about $2,494,000. The good thing was we had 5 bidders. The downside was that the low bid was above our engineer's estimate, which was about $2,070,000. I think I may have written that incorrect. $2,090,000 was the engineer's estimate of probable costs. So Gershenson came in about 19% above. M&H was about 20% above. So they were both pretty close. And incidentally, the high bid was Lamke. They were 53% above the engineer's estimate at almost 3.2 million. So pretty good range from the low to the high there. So tonight, we're looking for direction regarding moving forward with this construction project. And this is quite frankly, a difficult recommendation to move forward with. And I think what I'm suggesting is considering the possibility of rejecting the bids because the low bid was above the engineer's estimate. We do have some time to reject the bids and re-advertise it again. We did check with MoDOT and we have about 5 months with which to work with effectively, that we have to have essentially a concurrence of award from MoDOT. So I believe we have the time to reject the bids and re-advertise it and move forward. Of course, there's nothing saying we have to move forward at all, frankly. It is an important project. It is a project on MoDOT's system that we've worked on for several years now. It's unfortunate this was the case. I will say that we are going through an unprecedented historic period of time right now with construction in the state of Missouri. I think you're probably aware that we are spending over 30 million to improve roads in and around Wildwood currently. And MoDOT is putting $1 billion, or has put $1 billion towards I-70 statewide, with another 2.2 billion to come. So it's a record time for construction of projects right now. So I think we're expecting to see and are starting to see the price of materials at the minimum going up. When you look at unit prices that they bid across the board for all these contractors, I mean, they are definitely up over where we were at 5 years ago, no doubt. So we're seeing some inflation, and I think that's likely not going to change if we rebid it, but the thought would be if we rebid it, we will try to lessen some of the requirements that would allow more competition. For example, we believe that we can allow options on some of the pavement to be either concrete or asphalt, and that should reduce or increase competitiveness and lower unit prices for pavement. We talked to MoDOT about doing this, and something they do allow, so we think we have an option of potentially reducing costs in that manner. And possibly by tightening up a few other things here and there after we talk to some of the bidders. Goal will be to get more competitive bids and reduce costs. Flip side of it is we're going to wait another month or two. And during that period of time, we don't know what's going to happen. So there is definitely risk if we don't move forward at this point. There is no guarantee that we're going to see cost savings. You might see an increase in cost. So it's a difficult decision that we're faced with at the moment. I think with that, I'll stop and answer any questions that you might have.
Mabry.
Yes, thanks. And I don't want to mischaracterize. It sounded like you were stating that you were making the uncomfortable recommendation to reject all bids. Did I hear that part correct? That's the department's position, is that they're regretting it, but it seems like the most prudent tack is to reject all bids and hope against hope for opportunities to tighten up scope and loosen up the scope to attract a greater quantity of bidders that might bid cheaper. Is that kind of a thumbnail, or am I getting some of that wrong?
Councilmember, I think that's fairly accurate. Again, the anticipated start of construction really isn't until after the first of the year. We had to do that based on the fact that we have to build a wall in the first phase of construction. And what we found was we couldn't get the wall materials shipped and on site really much before that point. So I don't anticipate actual construction to any large degree to occur before the first of the year. So if we postpone the award of the project by another month or so, I don't expect that it's going to change that to any degree. So I don't think you're going to see construction delayed by doing this. The question is, are we going to see costs come down? Or will we actually see costs go up in the bid? Quite frankly, when we do this, most cases, we don't save money. We just don't, because you are delaying commitments for material costs. That's what we would be doing, because right now they have those in place. And if we don't move forward, they'll have to rebid it. So they'll have to reach back out to suppliers and then get new commitments. So based on what materials could be doing, it could be going up, and that would be factored into the bids.
Okay, it sounds all the world to me like what it's really being proposed, and I would agree 100% with this, that it's being proposed that though there's an if chance that something might occur, the department's of the opinion that there's an almost assured tilt toward the if chance not paying off. And instead of opening up the bids to a greater quantity of more economically minded contractors, we might actually be thwarting our goals by shunning those legitimate contractors who we thought capable enough to bid the job in the first place. And they'll become disenchanted, or they'll figure that now the bidding pool is going to be diluted and they've got less chance than they thought they had before. We've now lost some portion of those 5 original bidders. We might gain another 5 or another 5 or 7. We have to now cheapen up the project from what their optimal scope included. That I'm being just left ambivalent and wondering that for the 17%, which equated to some $50,000 or $70,000, but is that between our 2,090,000 and the 2,400,000 that came in, something like that, 300,000? Is that the delta in dollars?
Mhm.
Yeah, the low bid was 2,468,000, and then the engineer's estimate was 2,070,000, so it's about 400,000.
400,000. And given just a month, now I could see if we were gonna wait 7 or 8 months, we might be looking at a different market or a different multiplier. But I think that we won't get even 2% chance at anything less than another slug of 2,000,004s, 2,000,007s. And it's just given the amount of time that I've had an opportunity to talk. I did not look at this one. So apologies for that. I won't make a recommendation except that it sounds like, just on the face of it, we've got a lot more to lose than to gain.
Are we
Tracy?
not allowed to go back to the lowest bidder and say, what if we change the scope? Okay.
You
we're
have
allowed
to
do that.
reject all
We have to
bids
do
and
the
then
whole bid,
reissue
right?
it.
But that's what I thought.
It's federal money I hear.
And
Now, that'd be for any project. We couldn't negotiate. If we do a request for bid, we have to honor whatever we're asking for and what's provided through that process. We can't go back and negotiate. If it's
I thought we
there are
did that.
ways for RFPs that are different, but that's not for large construction projects.
Clay, you had something?
Yeah, I don't know if I missed it when I left, but was there any explanation from the engineers about what they thought in the almost 20% increase was due to?
Well, we've had limited discussions with the contractors at this point, quite frankly, and I don't know that it's appropriate for us to get too far into the weeds with them just yet. That's why if we do reject the bids, we would like to follow up with each one of them in more detail to get some feedback. We did receive some comments. And again, I don't want to mischaracterize. I'm not suggesting we're going to get bids that would be equivalent to the engineer's estimate. That's not what I'm thinking would happen. If we got bids that were 100,000 lower, I would be tickled to death, frankly. If we saved any money, I think I'd be satisfied, just because we expended the effort, we tried to see if that was indeed possible. The worst case again would be if it comes in above what we have right now, and that could happen. So with the 5 bids, you just don't know what Gershensen's future holds. They may get another big contract in the meantime somewhere else and decide they don't want to bid it.
No, I was just trying to ask, do the engineers, are they attributing this to inflation or have what? I'm sorry,
I think you said it was mostly because all the other work, right?
When I look at the unit prices, in large part, it's inflation. It's the unit prices are reflective of a lot of construction that's going on in the industry.
Okay. And I would probably agree that it's not gonna get any better in the short run to run the bids again, probably. So, okay, I just was wondering if what they thought the increases were due to.
Okay, Mr. Vanek?
Yeah, just so I completely understand, the East-West Gateway award was for 2.4 mil for the roundabout, correct? This is just the engineering estimate. Was this the estimate that was done when the application was submitted, or was
No,
this?
this was updated 6 months ago.
Yes,
Six
last
months ago.
fall, right, that's correct.
Okay.
No.
And so we're 400,000 over on the cheapest bid. Does the East-West Gateway funding, can it absorb this increase?
So
It cannot.
it will not, that's correct. So we get a fixed amount per our agreement for federal projects. So in this case, it's 1.36 million, and that's all we're going to get. Now, they did have a program a year ago where it was kind of a one-time increase. And we were lucky and we were able to get about 400,000 extra for the Manchester Taylor project. They did not extend that program, so we did check on that, but it did not get extended.
So if we go with the cheapest bid, how much are we looking as a city in order to make up the difference between what East West Gateway has funded us for? And is it 400,000? So we're on the hook for 400,000. If,
Well, we're over budget by 400,000 at this point.
yes. Okay.
We're only gonna get 1.36 from the federal government to cover the cost of construction out of the total 2.4 million.
So
There
we're.
go the pickleball courts for sure.
Marshall.
I guess just going again, it is sad that you can't go back and negotiate to go asphalt versus concrete, but unfortunately, I mean, every bid we've had is coming in 20% over what we thought it was 6 months ago. So I just don't believe it's gonna be any less in order to do that. If anything, I think it could end up going much higher than what we have now. So that's just my opinion. I don't think that there's any reason to think that anything's gonna come down, considering $1 billion on Highway 70. I mean, they are spending all that money we voted for and unfortunately, it's just not, we're not getting our what we think it should be our fair share, but so I don't know that going back and trying to rebid it over the next 5 months would save us any money at all. My gut feel is I think it would end up costing us more, but just my 2 cents worth.
All right. Anybody else?
Just the capper is, applaud the gumption, to tighten up the scope, economize where possible, to the extent that the percentage of the 100,000 that comes off of the 2,400,000 would be enough to get the 100,000, it would be a county coup in speaking, so to speak. I'd like to see the original quality of the project live for posterity, and had known that I was part of paying that extra 100,000 over what the best case scenario would be in this market. So the really short sentence of that is I would motion for proceeding with low bid.
Okay, so we got a motion to proceed with the low bid. Anybody care to make a second? Or have any thoughts or discussions on it? I would just add this, I appreciate, Rick, that I'm, personally, I would be somewhat inclined to defer to your expertise on this, and I appreciate that you're suggesting that we maybe take a pause and reassess this thing, because that's something that, is important for us to do. I'm just wondering if we find, as you said, if we just find ourselves in this very weird point in time where apparently everybody's building all of the roads imaginable, so everything is just more expensive. And it doesn't sound like, because of the funding we have tied to this, that we have the ability to go, you know what, we're just gonna pause on this for 24 months while everybody else's roads get done, right? I mean, we have to do something.
We need, I would always say this, and we can rebid it, but you're probably gonna, refer to him, you're gonna probably get a higher amount back, but
I don't have a crystal ball, none of us do,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah,
that said, it's either, it's kind of, we've gotten the numbers back. We're probably not gonna get better numbers. We need to decide whether or not we wanna go forward. Or if we don't go forward, we will lose the funding.
Okay, so we've got a motion to go forward with a low bid. Mr. Albers, would you?
I'll second it.
Mr. Albers will second it. Okay. So we got a first and second to move forward with the low bid. Any discussion on the motion? Yes.
Have we got well over four? I don't see Mr.
Yeah, we're good. Chris is out, but
Okay, good.
we got enough people.
I was just frightened when I can see.
Yeah, we
Sorry
should be
for
good.
the interruption.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? Okay. All those in favor of moving forward with the low bid, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, unfortunately, we're paying a lot for roads these days. Hopefully, it'll be a really nice road.
Do we get to?
I was wondering, Rick, so they haven't
On about
reviewed that
total.
part, because we're gonna do this, right?
Time you get them on.
What about the part by Lafayette, did they redo that? I imagine they did that.
waiting on the traffic signals to get completed and the curbing at those intersections and those ones.
All right, so we have one more item on the agenda tonight, but Mr. Lee and I have been secretly communicating with one another, and we've been here for quite a while, so I'm gonna make a suggestion that we postpone this item until next meeting. And if everybody is okay with that, I don't think we need an official meeting to
Might
do
snow,
that.
I don't know.
You never know.
This weather's probably good.
Out there.
Yes, sir.
Just a miscellaneous item. Lots of great content tonight. I just want to thank everybody for their hard work, you know.
And that
Been very good. Do we need a motion to postpone it?
Can we get a motion? to
Let's do a motion to postpone our snow thing made by Ms. Nyan, seconded by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Yeah, good job, everybody tonight. Lots of good stuff. Sorry, we're here a little bit late, but we're getting some things happening. Anybody care to make a motion to adjourn? Made by Ms. Nyan, seconded by Mr. Albers. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll see you next month, and I guess we'll see you guys next week. Is it next week?
Monday.
Monday for the council meeting. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Phillips and Charles.
Thursday.
No.